All right. Let's make sure this is working. I just check it on YouTube.
I can
All
hear
right,
a
we're
fan in
good.
your laptop.
Oh, the fan on my laptop, yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit loud. All right, big up everybody. I know it's been a while. I haven't been live in a long time. So today we are going to go through some misconceptions about the caste system in India. So this comes off the back of different various streams and different discussions that I've been listening to lately, especially all of the supremacist kind of discussions that have been going on, and a lot of misconceptions that these, white Brahmins are oppressing these darker skinned, lower caste people. And it's just kind of not correct in a sense, historically. So we're going to go through those reasons. Everybody smash that like button. I've got one guest here, Mr. Gangaputra. He's going to be helping me out. Two more potential guests. Hopefully they will be showing up. I have sent the link out and they'll be helping out with more of the doctrinal kind of religious influence of it. They got Ghost, they got Skyworks. Oh, is that the infamous Govinji? Big up, Govin. Check your mic,
It's
Govin.
the communist. It's the communist that we
Oh,
know and love.
it's our favorite commie. Yay!
I'm not a commie, please. Thank you.
Oh no,
How you
I meant
doing?
commie as in like jihadi. That's what I
Oh,
meant QAUMI. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, you're becoming American. Commie.
Govin, did you hear? I said it like you, the caste system. The caste
Oh,
system.
the caste system. Okay.
With the Long Island accent. Oh, that's the Wendy Doniger accent, isn't it?
Yeah, some gems about that one
Why are you
there.
disrespecting such a scholar, Gangaputra? I mean, why are you so disrespectful towards academicians and erudite scholars?
I want to say a few more things, but I don't want to like really say those things.
Is it because she's white? Oh my god, how racist.
Of course, she's white. We all know she's white, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, see, you get it. You get it already.
No, this Gangaputra guy lives in this inferiority complex, right? He loves the white man and he wants to be like the white man, but he still
Oh,
criticizes the white man. You're such a fascist.
If you, well, if you, oh, that's something else I was talking about earlier. But either way, like if you must know, if it's like one, like, white person I like, you know what, leave it. Yeah, whatever.
Can't we use emojis here? Because I don't know, I'm so used to using them.
Such an Indian WhatsAppia, man. Like, I want to use emojis. Like, come on.
on your
Ek
phone
chup
you
kar.
can, but on the laptop, I don't know how to, honestly.
I don't know.
Yeah, because these ones, they're like in the YouTube live chat, like over here. These the comments, and then like there's like our private chat. So I don't know, to be
All
honest.
right.
On the YouTube one, you
Bit
can.
sorry, I just derailed this conversation. Were you guys
No,
having a
it's
serious
all good.
discussion?
No, we just literally just started. We literally just started. I just hit the live
All
button.
right.
And we haven't all spoken a while, so it's okay. We can all catch up. So yeah, I will let me post the outline in the private chat. I wonder if I can do that. So I've kind of made an outline for today's show just to maybe kind of keep us on track. And basically, we're going to get into the misconception in modern day woke interpretations. Now, this is not to deny any suffering that has happened because of, current day like oppression or things that people are going through, because we do definitely want to, um, acknowledge that there are issues in current day society because of this system. So what we're going to basically get into was how this system became the British kind of institutionalization of it. The census. Here, let me see. I'll post the line here. Private chat. Paste. Oh, well, that didn't post in the good format. But anyway, Govin, you'd probably be good at helping us go through some of the terminology, right? So I figure we would start off with like the difference between caste and jati and varna, right? Um, so there's that. And then we can get into like these social hierarchies, the word caste, like where that came from. Yeah, and we could kind of go from there. So why don't we start with definitions? I think that would be good.
Sure. Um, See, again, like you said, I think you made a very important point that we don't want to demean any community or deny any suffering that they have gone through. We just want to state the fact that things were different than what they are today. And there are a lot of misinterpretations about text and different, scriptures that are being taught to us with people that have certain agendas. So that's the aim. Now, coming to the definition, see, when it comes to Varna, so you find numerous references to Varna and Jati in different texts, and you find the references of both Varna and Jati in the Vedas as well, and categorically in the Purusha Suktas, and that is something that is being quoted a lot as well. So Varna essentially refers to the kind of work that you are doing, and in Sanskrit, Jati also refers to the same thing. Now, the connotation today that we see is very different because we use jati, varna, and caste interchangeably. But if we go to the technical meaning, they're very different. Now, if you go by religious aspect of it, you find references in Bhagavad Gita, and categorically the chapter 4, Chatur Varnyam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha, which means that, all the four varnas are created by me, and they're divided based on gunas and karmas. Now, we do find birth based references in this, because you have different gunas for different varnas, but what determines your varna is essentially your prarabdha karma, the karmas that you do in past. And prarabdha is not just limited to human beings. It is in all encompassing, and it also includes your birth in different forms of beings. Like if you have bad prarabdha, you could also be born as a mosquito, or you could also be born in a different kind altogether. But in Hinduism, the human form is valued a lot. You get the human existence after a long period of time, right? So the prarabdha karma decides the kul that you will be born in. But I think but the point here is that you also find references in text where they say that varna is not just birth based, it is more based on work. And you find references in Padma Puran as well, where they say Janmana Jayate Shudra, that everybody is born as a Shudra only. It's only after you do your work, after you do your Nitya Karmas and things like that, that is when you become what you are. And you also find references in Shiv Puran where they state that, your pravritti, the kind of things that you do, that determines your varna. Like you could be born in a Brahmin family, but you could be a Kshatriya. You could be born in a Kshatriya family, but you could be a Brahmin. So you find references of that, like for example, Parshuramji was a Brahmin, but he picked up arms and he killed a lot of Kshatriyas too, who were, you know, trying to spread a dharma. Then also you find references with Vishwamitraji becoming a Brahmin, though he was born as a Kshatriya. So Hindu texts contain both diametrically opposite actions, and you also find references in Mahabharata and categorically in the Yaksha Prashna that Yudhishthira asks. So, there in the last question that the Yaksha asked to Yudhishthira, he says a very different thing, which is also interesting. As per him, it's not just gunas or it's not just your birth, but it's your vyavahar that defines your varna. So, varna essentially is a very big term where you do find some references to birth, but most importantly, all scriptures and texts state it again and again that just because you are born in a family, that doesn't mean that you are entitled or you are superior to anybody. You have to do your karma. And I think the point is, and I'll just stop because I think I've been talking a lot. The point here is that Varna as a term is not demeaning, neither is Jati, because all societies all over the world, they might not had the Varna system, but they also had social stratifications where different people used to do different kinds of work. So social stratification and hierarchy is quite natural to human beings. You can never find a single society where you did not have them. Right. And now coming to the question that how is that different from caste? I think the difference lies in the rigidity. Because in the Jati Varna system, and I think Ganga Putra ji can add to this, in we do find references historically where the Jati Varna system was fluid, but over a period of time it became extremely rigid. And this is not just limited to British colonialism. You had a lot of invasions during Muslim period as well, and because of that, the system became extremely rigid. And you saw that the system was limited. The kind of works that people did were limited to certain communities, right? So over a period of time, it became rigid due to invasions and colonialism. But the reality is that we did find fluidity historically. And now I think the problem with the term just caste is that it puts a lot of rigidity. It reflects that rigidity. And I think that's where it is different from Varna, because in Varna you could be born anywhere, but still you could achieve great things in life with your karmas and nitya karmas. And you find numerous references where people who were born in castes or categories that are considered low, but they were still able to attain a lot of fame and lot of respect in Hinduism. And most recently you can find this in even last few hundred years, where you have a lot of Shudra saints coming from different parts of India. Like Surdas was a Shudra, but still people love him, people venerate him because of his love for Krishna. Then Namdev, Tukaram, and also the saints from South. So I think the point is, all members, all Varnas have always been an integral part of society. But over a period of time, due to invasions and colonialism, things got distorted, and because of that, rigidity came in. So yeah, I'm sorry, I hope I didn't speak too long because there's a lot to say on this topic, but I did try to say whatever I could in brief.
No, that's great. That's I think that was a very, very good explanation. Thank you so much. So, the rigidity that we are, that was kind of brought by outer influence, especially by the Europeans. So, like in medieval Europe, right? I have in this slide, they had a very rigid system of hierarchy, of feudalism. So, this says, medieval societal structures was like a pyramid with the lower class creating the large base while slowly moving higher with the more royal and less people occupying higher slots. In almost all cases in the pyramid depended on your birth status and nothing more. So at the bottom rung were the serfs and the peasants. Almost 90% of the population of medieval Europe were serfs. Serfs were just the regular people of their day who lived the villages, worked the land of the of the feudal, the feudal lords. In many ways, they were slaves. They could not leave the land of their birth without permission of the Lord. They gave up much of what was produced to their Lord. Unlike slaves, however, they could not be bought, sold, or traded. But serfs held various jobs in the feudum, working fields, harvesting, etc., etc. So here's like a diagram. Obviously you have the king at the top, the nobles, the landowners, the lords, but they're still all vessels to the king. Under them, the knights. In return, the knights fought for the nobles and the king. And knights were allowed to own land. And then the peasants worked the land for the nobles and the knights, who in turn offered them protection. So there was no social mobility in Europe, in medieval Europe systems. So I think a lot of that carried over with the colonization aspect. Would you kind of agree that when applying these things, this is where they got that kind of rigid system?
Who's the
Uh,
question to?
is it for
Either.
Gangaputra or is it for me?
Both of you guys. Either or. Doesn't matter.
I think Gangaputraji, you can go ahead. I've already spoken, and I'll come after you. Is it okay, or would you like
You
me to go?
answer this. Yeah, you answer this first. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So see, I think there was no social mobility in Europe, and you find a lot of references to casta system because the term caste itself comes from the Portuguese term caste, casta, right? So all societies had social stratifications, including Europe, and I think all European societies had feudalism too. But in India, I'm not denying that there was feudalism, but at the same time, there was social mobility. And the work that people did was based on what lineage you come from. But you could change that as well. So you find references of lot of Shudras becoming king. Like Shivaji, he was born as a Shudra, but he became a king. And at the same time, you also have references of Brahmanas taking political power and becoming kings. Like the Peshwas were Deshasthas and Chitpavans. So they were Brahmins, but they eventually took up arms. So you did find social mobility in India. But the problem, I think, comes with the caste surveys that the British bring in. And I think there was a lot of confusion when the caste survey was being done because India was a very big country, and at that point in time, we were not very advanced in terms of technology. And by we, I mean the world. Nowadays, we have a lot of advanced methods of finding out people and sort of conducting surveys more efficiently. At that point in time, it was all manual, so it took a lot of time. And you see that there was a lot of differences between the first caste survey that the British did and the second caste census that they did. And the problem was that in India, you find a lot of people that share a title today, and that might be categorized as untouchables, or that might be categorized as general or Brahmins, but you realize that their surname might be same. So things were divided based on title, and you also had systems and places where everybody had the same surname because they belonged to a certain village or certain community. Now I think the problem is that when the Europeans came in and they did the caste survey, they were quite stringent on putting everybody in those four categorizations, that you have to be just one Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And that actually brought in a lot of rigidity. And you see this even happening for Brahmins, because if you see the first caste survey, in that caste survey, if I remember correctly, Ayers, that are one of the Brahmins community in Tamil Nadu, they were not put in under Brahmins, and only the Iyengars and Subramaniams were categorized as Brahmins. But during the second caste survey that was done, later on Ayers were added to it. So you find that reference that the system became much more rigid because of what the categorization European did. And at the same time, you also find references where people from different communities used to do different things also. For example, the farmers actually used to pick up arms too in the non-harvest season, right? So that's why you see there are a lot of communities that are traditionally farming, but they are very strong and their bodies are very well maintained because they used to fight for war as well. That used to be additional income. But you see that when the British came in, they brought in laws that restricted the peasantry. So the peasantry could not fight at all. They could only do their peasantry job. So the lot of laws that the colonialists brought in, and a lot of fixed categorizations that were there, that created confusion. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Gangaputra, would you like to? Um,
Hey, hi. Yeah, so I mean, I have my disagreements with the position that Pandit Satish Sharma has taken, which is that it was the British who came up with the idea of social stratification in such a manner that created discrimination. That's just objectively not true. I know Panditji does a good amount of work in the UK, but I mean, this is a position that I've always had an issue with. And I'm going to be quite open about this. We find references to um, early sort of, I would say, examples of social hierarchy and perhaps you know conversations around social mobility. There is some circumstantial evidence to suggest that there were conversations happening uh, in, yeah, I guess Sanatan fold in general. It's a very broad term, but uh, I don't know how to put this, but um, prior to even Islamic invasion, right? And rigidification of caste, in my own understanding, it may have been aggravated as a social response to the massive sea change that happened in society due to Islamic invasion. But I don't think that was the reason for the origins or the beginnings of caste rigidification, right? It could just as well be that changing feudal realities may have, brought this on. It's a possibility. Again, we don't know anything for certain, and a lot of these things, when we try to examine about that part of Indian history, we're in the dark because we don't have direct evidence to suggest anything. So, I mean, my guess is as good as anybody else's. Having said that, I think the important, yeah, if you could just share the link that I've shared with you. Yeah. So I think in order to understand what's happening right now, and I'm not sure exactly, I mean, if you could just bring up the question again so that I can address that question particularly, because I also want to get into the politics of it because that's what I do. Scriptural thing is not something that I generally sort of delve into because not that's not my area of expertise. So if you could just repeat your question again, I would have some thing to go on.
do you think the rigidity that we see in modern day India was an effect of the rigidity from the early medieval European model, basically?
No, I don't think so. I think this happened all on its own in India. Medieval Europe has only had interaction with India in the sense that you have trade and stuff going on. Social interaction, large scale presence is not observed in this time, and it seems like a very long stretch for a society that is very much well established in its own traditions to take inspiration to change or even cause change, a large scale change in the social paradigms of Indian society, in such a manner that they take any influence from outside in this regard, especially with regard to medieval Europe. Colonial Europe is a different matter, right? I mean, you have colonization, you have the presence of colonial powers in India. Almost all the important ones were here. Even the Spanish have been here, that's a little less known. The Portuguese have been here, the French have been, of course, and the British succeeded the most, right? So, I mean, that's the colonial part. But before that, you have the Islamic invasion, right? That's somewhere around 13th century, if I'm not mistaken, 12th century. I mean, if you're going to, go by the definition of Pakistan, which is like the arrival of the first Pakistani, who's an Arab invader by the name of Muhammad bin Qasim, that's around 7th century, right? And I don't take that into account because that had very little impact on the Indian civilization as a whole. Around 12th to 13th century, when you have the start of the Delhi Sultanate, and prior to that you have some other invasions as well, that's when you see like a large scale interest growing in from the Middle East, or what we call West Asia, in India. So you have people who are coming in for basically functional gains, for wealth, etc. And that in all likelihood did create some sort of social response that is that starts aligning with the bhakti movement, right? Slowly, I mean, it's a stretched out period of somewhere between 800 years or so. That's a long time too, right? So sometimes those connections are also very difficult to prove, because a lot of the bhakti intellectuals are not those people uh, who are just give me a second, please.
Sure. Um, let's see. Well, he asked if I could share this post, so I'll read through it until he comes back. It says, 6 years ago, this very day, I boarded a 7 p.m. flight to London en route to Delhi for my first trip ever to India after 2 decades of studying the concept of caste. I knew not a soul, so it took months of planning and hard ringing over visas, bureaucracies to get there. I arrived in the night fog of Delhi 22 hours later with the sole purpose of communing with like-minded scholars whom I've reached out to sight unseen to join an intimate conference on the subject that had been my life's mission since my research on caste for the warmth of other suns. I carried with me my marked up copy of The Annihilation of Caste by Dr. Ambedkar. I've channeled the spirit of the only caste scholar to have lived during the Jim Crow South in India, Gerald Berriman, a lodestar for the case I was making about the parallels in both countries. But what propelled me more than anything beyond the urgent threats to our democracy over the ruptures of caste was a lifetime of chafing under caste myself, the pushback and indignities I faced as a living, breathing caste experiment, obstacles that would become the scenes and sinew of caste, the origins of our discontent. I told no one what my project was or even what I was working on a book in. It is my process, as anyone who knows me knows, to never ever talk to anyone about what I'm working on, a vow I've kept since the warmth of other suns.
I'm back.
I've learned the. Okay, I was just reading through this while you were gone. Do you want me to finish or should I stop?
No, it's okay. I think Govind is gone. So, yeah. So the reason why I
Oh,
shared this is because,
there he is.
I mean, yeah, he's back. So one thing that we have to be particular about is that there is no caste rigidity in India today. There is no conversation around rigidity because it's become illegal to discriminate people on the basis of caste, right? There is a possibility for you to sort of have a sort of social mobility, which is based on class now, how much wealth you have, right? And now more than ever, you have marriages that are happening outside of caste, and that's something that's happened at an internal level in India. So that's really changed the conversation completely from I mean, if you don't have a traditional system, the idea of a traditional social mobility just doesn't work because the system and the paradigm itself has completely shifted, right? So you don't need to have social mobility to advance in life in India today, right? And that's where the conversation gets political. See, now this link that I've shared, this is about Isabel Wilkerson, who's written this book called Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. And she's basically theorizing that the caste-based, I mean, the discrimination, racial discrimination that exists in America today has its roots in the Indian social stratification system. It's a long stretch, but it's being enabled by certain kinds of intellectuals. If you see this picture here, you have G. Arunima and Sharika Tiranganama. Now, both these intellectuals, and in the corner you see Dilip Mandal. Now, these are all quote unquote like-minded, thinkers, intellectuals, like she's saying here, because these are all, not just Dalit thinkers, but people who have a political color to their activism, right? They will even just give me a second. Like, some people have no concept of
Okay, so let's see. Where I learned the hazards of sharing new ways of seeing the world before you publish them. In that circle of scholars in Delhi, I finally found people who spoke my language. They seemed delighted to hear an African American woman's view. Oh, African American woman's expertise and kindred truth, the parallels I long identified in these systems of oppression. On
yeah.
these trips, okay.
So what's happening is she is trying to look at African American against them, like the discrimination that happens in the US. It's somehow got to do with India, right? And of course, when we study American sort of system, like, it's very color oriented, right? The color of your skin, etc. That has nothing to do with the Indian system, but because the last remaining inklings of any sort of social stratification in any society survives in India, in whatever shape or form, that's where the conversation's at now. So it's there, so it must be from there. This has nothing to do with, like, European ideas of, like, social stratification. This has nothing to do with European sort of ideas of eugenics, pseudosciences, racial supremacy. No, 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 no. That's nothing to do with, like, what's happened in the US or in other Western colonies that became eventually independent countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, for example, right? So somehow you have, what's happening here is you have politically motivated Dalit thinkers and activists here, okay, and they sort of enable this kind of ecosystem. You also have the infamous case of equality labs trying to push a certain kind of propaganda. And if you can shape this conversation in terms of how Americans can find it palatable, right, in such a case, you will find people who are takers of your line of argument, and that's what is happening over here. So we can delve into the nuances, but of how the system formed and what is the situation today. But what's happening now is a very motivated sort of an attack. One of the things that happens also is that Isabel Wilkerson has traveled to India after she's written the book, right? So she's mentioning here that she's already written the book, and now and after she's written the book, then she's traveling to India, right? And even when she's coming to India, she is interacting with quote unquote like-minded intellectuals, which is basically an echo chamber inside India, which also depend on their funding from abroad, likely from American institutes, mostly left of center oriented, postmodernist influenced organizations, etc. And they're not going to say anything otherwise, right? Because that's how they find their voice internationally. When Wilkerson comes to India, they'll say, "Oh yes, of course, that this is all there is to it." Of course, one also has to take into account that caste consciousness is not just about the Dalit community. It's all many other different communities that don't find a voice when you're only having a kind of particular conversation by a kind of politically motivated group of academics with a particular goal in mind, which is usually uh, left of center Dalit activism, which is usually very highly politically loaded. I'm not saying all their concerns are wrong, obviously, but the kind of loud activism that happens in many cases, that doesn't reflect the reality of the country today. Um, and this also makes it easy, for vested interests that are internationally located groups sometimes other states, countries, right, who want something on India, and this is the, this is the low hanging fruit. Hey, they've got caste too, they're discriminatory and this and that. Well, you've never been in India, uh, you've never lived in society in this country for long enough, right? And this is what you this is what basically becomes the conversation, which is concentrated political noise with very less voices that don't sound unlike other voices, right? And so a Western academic, I'm not saying everything is easy for somebody like Isabel Wilkerson. I'm sure like she's faced her share of discrimination in her country, etc. But you know, uh, uh, the US will fund certain kinds of programs, right, in India. And India doesn't have that same kind of ecosystem. So our academics depend on not just the US, but UK, other Western countries, right? But if you're going to come to India, it's a sponsored program for whatever group is supporting you from there, right? And it becomes this whole thing where there is a lot of dishonest conversation going on. So both Dr. Arunima here, and then Sharika, and then Dilip Mandalji, is Dr. Dilip Mandal also. I will, yeah. So Dr. Mandal, these are all people that are usually the loudest, angriest, and oftentimes highly politically motivated voices that will say things. At least I know of Dr. Mandal, which may not be rooted in reality, but is often justified by, "Hey, we can say these things too." It's I mean, if you're going to draw like examples from American political activism, then I would say what what Dr. Mandal does is very similar to what highly bigoted black nationalists have done in the past. Right? There is discrimination, there was murder, there was lynching. All of those things are true, but on the other hand, social realities today are different from what they were, let's say, even 150 years ago in the US. That's the problem. And Dr. Mandal
Uh,
is just, yeah, yeah. You're saying
uh,
something, Govind.
can I add a point to this topic, if it's okay? Okay, I'll go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you made
absolutely.
very,
Go ahead.
very important points, and because for example, like if I talk about myself, like for most of my life, I have lived in India, but now I don't live in India anymore. So I think the experience that you have when you migrate out of India is very different, and that is a moment when you become more sort of uh, pedantic about your identity that you're a Hindu, because you go from a Hindu majority country to a different place where you have different religions, different laws, and you just want to stick to your custom. But at the same time, whichever country that you migrate to, whether it's in the Western Hemisphere or whether it's in East Asia or any part of the world, even if when you go to Africa, you want to adapt to local cultures and traditions, and you want to integrate into the society. So you don't take the political baggage that you have from a particular country to that country, and you just try to immigrate. And I think Hindu immigrants categorically and Indian immigrants, they try to integrate in every society, and I think even the Hindus in America have done that. They have integrated into the society, and they have adopted Hinduism in a new way and Americanize it so that it synchronizes with the society collectively. Now, I think my contention and categorically with what was happening with SB 403 was that these laws were actually based without evidence, and all the allegations that were made actually were disproven in the California court. And they said that the person who was doing this was based on caste, but when you actually went through the allegations, you realize that he had a lot of people who did not belong to who belong to the Dalit community as well. But Mr. Sundar Iyer was giving him the opportunity as well, and he also had seniors who belonged to that community at Cisco and who was senior to him. So he was not trying to discriminate against anybody based on caste. This has been proven in the court. And at the same time, you also find this reference that uh, you know uh, uh, Just a second. Yeah, so you also find this reference that the allegations that were made could also be tried under some other law, because America already has laws that discriminate, for discrimination based on hereditary. So if you do feel that you do face discrimination, then you can use those laws as well. So categorically bringing these laws in based on caste is actually targeting the Hindu community collectively, and Hindus in any part of the world, irrespective. I think the Hindu society has a lot of problems. And I kind of agree with what Gangaputra said earlier, that yes, the society did have problems even before colonialism. It had social problems. But I think at the end of the day, Hinduism fosters a sense of identity as well, and, a sense of happiness. And, when you celebrate festivals, when you are celebrating Diwali or Holi and Janmashtami and so on and so forth, everybody just comes together, and you forget the stratifications that you have, whether you are poor, whether you are
Actually,
rich.
Govin,
So
it's
yeah.
not just that. It's not just that. See, there's also this element. Do you know there are so many important temples today in India, okay, that have Dalit priests? This has got to be understood. See, with the recent consecration of the Ram Mandir, right? Uh, you had you had the controversy, the infamous controversy, right, with the prime minister, etc. But when the idol was installed over there, it, the idol of Ram Lala is holding a bow, right? Because Ram is like recognized by his bow and arrow, right? So that bow is actually made of gold, and that bow has been sent by the Mahavir Mandir Temple Trust, which is located in Bihar. It's a very famous temple, which is a Hanuman Mandir, essentially a temple dedicated to the deity of Hanumanji. And the priests there are Dalits. It is one of the most popular, I think the chief priest is a Dalit. It's one of the most popular temples in the entire country, right? And that's what you're looking at. Anybody who visits Bihar goes to that temple. It's right at the railway station, and it runs at least two or three massive hospitals. I think one of the oldest like cancer hospitals was started by that temple trust, right? And interestingly, it wasn't a temple trust that was established by the Dalit community. It was a temple trust that was established by a Brahmin community, and the leadership was shown from that community. So today these things matter in like the sense, like, average conversations, but it's the same, like, caste based discrimination matters in quite the same way in India as uh, lynchings matter in the US today of African Americans. It just doesn't happen, right? There is some I would say lobbying. I would say there is, like, social grouping that may lead to certain kinds of disgruntlements on either side. Okay, so it's not just, let's say, it's not just the Dalits complaining, it's also Brahmins complaining, right? And these are on either ends of the social hierarchy and the spectrum. But then people forget that there's these bunch of castes that are in between, and they've got their own issues and problems and complaints. Some of these middle castes are also dominant castes, right? For example, the Jats in the north, right? Technically they are a Shudra community, as tradition would have it, and then miss no be beat to point that out. But the practical reality is that they are feudal land holding, immensely powerful community in the north that change policies, that make the, that make New Delhi move, right? That's the power of the Jat community in the north. So, I mean, today's
So
reality
on
is quite
paper, and
different.
according to I'm sorry to cut you. On paper, according to the government, what for what of the levels do juts fall into?
So, okay, so this is complicated. See, as tradition would have it, they are peasants, right? So these are a peasantry community people that till land. Now, traditional interpretation will say that they are in the Shudra community because they are neither traders nor are they, the warriors who were traditionally tasked with, like, you know, uh, ruling feudal fiefdoms, etc. And neither are they the priestly caste, right? So
Mm,
traditionally speaking, as tradition would have it, they would be categorized as Shudras. But on the other hand, when the country became independent in 47, and in 1950 the constitution came about under the leadership of Dr. Ambedkar, by the way, right, who did make a lot of room for people from the marginalized communities to have a sort of space in India, and that was through our version of affirmative action, which is the reservation system, right?
mm,
So
mm,
during that time, I think it was recognized that this is a peasantry community traditionally understood to be as, quote unquote, low born. But because they have such a high amount of feudal fiefdom and this great amount of land holding, and as a consequence of that power, right? So they will not be
mhm.
categorized as, Dalit. Okay, because to be Dalit or
Right.
SC is constitutional criteria, right? It's not a traditional criteria. So there is further complication there. So for example, in Haryana you have mostly Jats that are Hindus, and in Rajasthan as well. But in Punjab,
Mhm,
Jats have mostly now converted to Sikhi, right? And with
mhm,
Sikhism, that they had an entire goddamn empire. The founder of the Sikh empire was a Jat ruler. I mean, the Jat ruler, Ranjit Singh, right? So,
mhm,
so they
mhm.
have had feudal control over the north, particular parts of the north, for the last 5 to 700 years, right?
Right. And then
And
after partition, there's Muslim Jats too, right?
of
On the
course,
Pakistan
yeah,
side.
yeah.
Yeah, in
In fact, what
Pakistan, you
you
know.
yeah,
Pakistan.
and
Yeah.
what you'll find interesting is these sort of casteist tropes are actually now more popular in a Pakistan, in a place like Pakistan, which is far more feudalistic in its nature, because it didn't crack
Mhm,
down on feudalism in quite the same way as India did, right? So the Jats would be as in Punjabi the same word is called Jat, right? So you have Jat Muslims in Pakistan. If you've got to call somebody a loser, somebody who is an airheaded person who doesn't think much, and he's a rowdy individual who is an angry individual, that's what the Urdu idioms are about. A Jat essentially is an idiot in Pakistan. You can't say that shit in India. You will have your ass handed to you. Okay, doesn't fly in a place like our country. So that's
But
the
So
aren't
difference.
they're
you a
just
Jat,
one
Gangaputra?
example. Oh, no, don't go there. Also,
You listen,
quickly, briefly, I'd
Jat
like to welcome
Balwan,
Parth.
Jat Balwan, Jai Bhagwan.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome Parthji to the panel. Parth is from the Heated Debates channel. Everybody go check out that channel. They have some really good debates. It's mostly Hindi. I'll post the link. His English isn't too good, so hopefully our other guests, Gangaputraji and Govaji, can help him or get his points across. But welcome to the panel, Parth. We're glad to
जी
have.
नमस्ते जैन जी, नमस्ते गंगापुत्र जी, नमस्ते गोविंद जी।
Namaste.
अ,
Namaste, Jai Shri Ram.
जी जय श्री राम।
Jai
जैसा
Jai
कि
Jai
जैन
Jai
जी ने
Shri.
बताया मेरी इंग्लिश ज़्यादा अच्छी नहीं है, तो मैं मोस्टली हिंदी में ही ज़्यादा बात करूँगा। आप लोग मेरी इसमें हेल्प कर सकते हैं थोड़ी ट्रांसलेट करने में, जो चीज़ मैं समझाऊँ।
Sure.
और मेरी स्टडीज़ मोस्टली स्क्रिप्चर्स पे ही है, तो आप लोगों ने कितना पार्ट कवर किया अब तक मुझे उसकी जानकारी नहीं है, बट स्क्रिप्चर से अगर कोई भी चीज़ें एक्सप्लेन करनी हो तो मैं आप लोगों को यहाँ पे कर सकता हूँ।
Jen, can I
नहीं
ask something to him? Like, because I made
Absolutely, go
scriptural
ahead.
points.
Yeah, go for it, please.
Yeah. So मैं आपसे हिंदी में बोलूं पार्थ जी?
जी, जी,
Um,
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल, कोई इश्यू नहीं।
हाँ, तो मैंने जब इस स्ट्रीम के स्टार्टिंग में कई सारे शास्त्रों का वर्णन किया। मैंने पुरुष सूक्त की बात की, मैंने गीता में श्लोक की बात की, चातुर्वर्ण्य मया शिष्टम, और फिर मैंने शिव पुराण का भी उदाहरण दिया। तो पहला प्रश्न ये है कि क्या वर्ण जो है या जाति है आपके हिसाब से वो केवल जन्म के आधार पे है या कर्म के आधार पे है या दोनों के आधार पे है? अगर आपको सनातन शास्त्रों के
जी।
हिसाब से बताना है तो।
तो
जी, तो
पार्थ
पहले
जी,
ना हमको
बिफोर
डिफरेंस
बिफोर
समझ।
आप
जी ओके, ओके सर।
आप 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 आंसर करें इससे पहले मैं क्वेश्चन थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन कर देता हूँ, ठीक है, पैनल के लिए। सो जैन, गोविंद जी इज आस्किंग पार्थ जी क्वेश्चन ऑन what is the question that you'd raise, that what is the basis of caste, whether it is your qualities or the gunas, or the profession that you do, etc., or is it sort of fixed at birth. So that's the basic question that Govind is asking. Parchi, go ahead.
Thank you.
जी, तो सबसे पहले तो हमको है ना जाति और वर्ण में भेद समझना होगा। जैसे कि हमारे सनातन वैदिक धर्म में मान्यता है, जाति होती है आपकी लाइक आपकी स्पीशीज़ से बिलॉन्ग करते हैं। जैसे हम मनुष्य हैं, तो ये मनुष्य जाति होगी। एक अगर कोई पशु है तो पशु जाति से है। जाति सिर्फ़ एक आपकी स्पीशीज़ को डिफाइन करने के लिए होती है। फिर आता है वर्ण। वर्ण जो होते हैं हमारे यहाँ जैसे आपको पता है 4 वर्णों में डिवाइड किया गया है सोसाइटी को। एक आपका ब्राह्मण, देन आपका क्षत्रिय, देन वैश्य एंड देन शूद्र। तो ये 4 वर्ण हैं और वर्ण आपके जो होते हैं वो क्वालिटीज़ के ऊपर होते हैं। जैसे कि आपने ये श्लोक कहीं पर सुना होगा, जन्मना जायते शूद्र, यानी कि जो जन्म से होता है वो शूद्र ही होता है। जब वो द्विज करवाता है अपने गुरुकुल में जाकर और द्विज होने के बाद जब वो स्टडीज़ करता है अपनी उस प्रॉपर फील्ड की, जैसे अगर वो शस्त्रों पे ट्रेनिंग ले रहा है तो वो क्षत्रिय बनेगा। वो अर्थशास्त्र पे पढ़ाई कर रहा है तो वो वैश्य बनेगा। और अगर उसने बाकी जो टीचिंग्स हैं धर्म की और जो अलग हमारे यहाँ और भी टीचिंग्स हैं, उन सबको ली है और देन उसके बाद वो लोगों को उन चीज़ों को सिखा रहा है, उनको वो समझा रहा है, तो वो ब्राह्मण है। यानी कि जो टीचर है एक तरह से कह लें वो ब्राह्मण है हमारे यहाँ। तो ये सब आपके प्रोफेशन पे आपके अंदर जो गुण हैं उनको लेकर उन गुणों के हिसाब से आपके अंदर ये वर्ण धारण करने को होता है। वर्ण का अर्थ ही दिया गया है जो वर्ण किया जाए, यानी कि जिस चीज को आप वर्ण कर सकें वो वर्ण है।
अच्छा, देखिए, अच्छा, I'll try to explain the case that Parth is arguing, that he, quoting from the scriptures, he's saying that at birth it is, and that's, his view, at birth everybody is regarded to be a Shudra, unless you have the Hindu rite of passage, which is called the Upnayan Sanskar, or more like, colloquially it's called the Janeu Sanskar, wherein you wear the sacred thread around your torso, right? And when you have that ceremony, it based on what your qualities are, you're given a profession, right? And whatever you do, whatever you study, or whatever profession you enter into, that's how your varna is decided. Again, that's Parth's view on this. And he's also arguing a case that jati is not like this one thing. He's saying that jati is about your species, right? Like if you're humans, so that's if you're a cat, that is also jati. Uh, uh, but then varn is more to do with your the social system and the division of labor. I don't think Parth is actually arguing a case for social hierarchy. So his point is that everybody is a shudra at birth, right? पर यहाँ पे प्रश्न उठ जाता है पार्थ भाई कि अगर ये सही है तो
जी।
फिर उपनयन संस्कार शूद्रों को क्यों नहीं प्राप्त होता है? मतलब
जी,
जहां तक मुझे
इसमें मैं आपको एक छोटी सी लाइक जी जी
भाई प्रश्न सुन लीजिए, है ना? तो मैं सुन रहा हूँ आपकी बात। मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि जैसा मतलब हमारी मान्यता है कि हम जो है आधिकारिक रूप से तो सभी को मतलब होना चाहिए, जैसे जिसमें कहते हैं कहने वाले लोग कि ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रिय और वैश्य को उपनयन संस्कार उनका होता है। लेकिन अगर आपका जनेऊ उतर गया है, ठीक है, तो फिर आप उपनयन करना उचित भी नहीं माना जाता। जैसे वैश्यों में आप ज्यादातर आप लोगों को देखेंगे उनका उपनयन अब नहीं होता है, क्योंकि ज्यादातर लोगों के केसेस में उतर चुका है, ठीक है। फिर क्षत्रियों में भी बहुत कम लोग हैं जो दीक्षा प्राप्त करते हैं, जनरली मैंने उन्हें ही देखा है, ठीक है, कि उनका उपनयन होता है। ब्राह्मणों में है बातें, ठीक है, तो उनका भी उपनयन तो होता ही है, ब्राह्मण होने की आइडेंटिटी से आज जुड़ा हुआ है उपनयन होना। अब जो यहाँ पे जो दलील मैं इसलिए दे रहा था आपको कि शूद्रों के संदर्भ में कहा जाता है कि शूद्रों का उपनयन नहीं होता है, तो इसके क्या कारण है? क्योंकि अब जैसे आपने बोला कि यदि सभी जन्म से शूद्र हैं, ठीक है, तो फिर सभी का उपनयन होना चाहिए, शूद्रों का भी होना चाहिए, है ना? तो ये प्रश्न है भाई मेरा, आप इसको अगर
जी,
दे
तो
सकें।
मैं आपको है ना यही मैं बताने वाला था। देखिए क्या है ये जो अभी आपने एक्सप्लेन किया ना ये सब बाद में जो प्रैक्टिसेस आ गई हैं हमारे अंदर, अभी जो करंट में चल रही है उन प्रैक्टिसेस के बारे में आपने कहा। मैंने स्क्रिप्चर के थ्रू आपको बताया कि स्क्रिप्चर्स में है कि शूद्र भी आपके वेद पढ़ने का अधिकार रखता है। जैसे मैंने एक पीपीटी शेयर की थी जैन को, उसमें बकायदा हमने वेद मंत्र कोट किए कि जो वेद पढ़ने का अधिकार है वो प्रत्येक मनुष्य मात्र को है। यानी कि जितने भी ह्यूमंस है वो डिपेंड, मतलब कुछ भी ऐसा नहीं कि लाइक वो शूद्र है तो नहीं पढ़ सकता, मतलब सारे चारों वर्णों के जो मनुष्य हैं, प्रत्येक मनुष्य मात्र को, चाहे वो स्त्री हो या फिर पुरुष हो, सभी को वेद पढ़ने का अधिकार है और सभी का उपनयन होना, द्विज होना, मतलब सभी को अलाउ है। तो आप ये जो बाद में लेटर ऑन प्रैक्टिसेस आई हैं कि जैसे जो हमारी कैसे समझाऊं आपको, लाइक पहले हमारे यहाँ बाय बर्थ नहीं होता था ये जो सिस्टम था, बट बाद में जो थोड़ा सा करप्शन हुआ आफ्टर लाइक इन्वेजन कह लो, या फिर जो प्रैक्टिसेस अलग हो गई, जो हमारे यहाँ फॉलो की जाने लगी कहीं इन्फ्लुएंस में या फिर कहीं किसी और कारण से, या थोड़े करप्शन की वजह से कह लें आप एक तरह से, तो देन ये चीज हुई कि शूद्रों को वेद अधिकार नहीं है, क्योंकि वो जन्मना शूद्र माना गया। जन्मना हमारे यहाँ पे सभी शूद्र होते हैं, ऐसा नहीं कि जो ब्राह्मण के घर पैदा हो गया तो ब्राह्मण ही होगा। जन्म से हमारे
अच्छा,
यहाँ
तो
कभी वर्ण
आप ये
व्यवस्था
कह
रखी
रहे
ही नहीं
हैं
गई थी।
आप ये कह रहे हैं कि इंटरप्रिटेशन में ही इन्होंने मतलब एक अड़चन डाल दी कि
जी,
भाई
Yeah,
मतलब
guys
जन्म से
could just
हैं तो चलो।
करप्शन हुआ है।
translate
जैसे जैन से मेरी जो इस पर डिस्कशन हुई थी लाइक एक दिन पहले, तो हमने वहां पे ये चीजें पूरी एक्सप्लेन की थी, वो पीपीटी दिखाते हुए। उसमें से हमने सारे मंत्र और श्लोक कोट किए थे, इवन मनुस्मृति, वेद से, और भी गीता से भी जो कोट किया था हमने, चतुर्वर्णम मया सिस्टम, जिसके बारे में गोविंद जी ने कहा। तो वहां पर साफ साफ श्री कृष्ण जी ने कह दिया है कि जो चारों वर्ण हैं वो उनके गुण और कर्मों के आधार पर उनको प्राप्त होते हैं। अगर एक ब्राह्मण घर में एक बच्चा पैदा हुआ है तो, और उसके अंदर वो ब्राह्मणों वाले गुण नहीं उत्पन्न हो रहे हैं और उसके गुण शूद्रों जैसे आ जाते हैं, तो वो ब्राह्मण घर में पैदा होने के बावजूद ब्राह्मण नहीं कहलाएगा, वो एक शूद्र कहलाएगा।
ठीक ठीक, मैं ट्रांसलेट कर देता हूँ, ठीक है। तो so Jen, what he's arguing is that as he shared the the PPT with you also, मैंने भी देखा है पार्थ भाई वो, ठीक है। So I mean there is obviously there is contradiction, right? So he's saying that the modern day practices and changing social dynamics is what change this milieu of basically rigidification of caste, right? And he's saying that although the interpretation was in the earlier times that everybody is a shudra from their birth, right? So therefore anybody can become anything based on what task they're allotted. Again, but this is Parth's view. Okay, I am not taking a religious position on any of this. I'm just translating, so don't murder me, people. Okay.
No,
So
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah. No, I have to clarify because people are going to say, oh, this is the person who's saying all of this. So so his view is that it is due to modern, I mean relatively modern practices, which in his view is like maybe perhaps because of invasions, etc. You have a rigidification of caste, wherein the case is argued then that, oh, because everybody is because people are shudras by birth, so shudras cannot be given any rights. You understand? To have like the rite of passage or be able to read the Vedas, whereas Parth's interpretation is that being a shudra at birth is everybody's stated default position, and after you've had the rite of passage, which is the upnayan ceremony, after that you're allotted what kind of work you do. But in his view, he's arguing that it is in fact the modern practices came about with an interpretation that if you're at birth so and so, or like so and so, therefore you will remain like so. Okay, and because you're a shudra at birth, so because you're a shudra at birth, you'll remain a shudra from that time on. Also, you will not be afforded these rights, etc. Not rights, I would say, these I would call it, yeah, privilege to be able to read scriptures, even because it was indeed a privilege not afforded to everybody else. So again, this is something that I'm saying, right?
Can I add a point to that?
Yeah,
Scriptural point
sure.
only, if it's okay.
Of course.
And I think, the point is that whichever text it is, I think in Hinduism, even during the Bhakti movement, you see this, that there is always this sense among the priestly class and always among the scholars that knowledge has to be accessible to everyone, right? Because you do find some restrictions with the reading of Vedas, but the Hindus want to ensure that that knowledge of Vedas reaches everybody, right? You might have restrictions as to the timings and who can read Vedas, but the knowledge is not restricted. And to ensure that Vedas becomes available to everybody, Maharishi Valmiki wrote Ramayana. Because the sense of the Vedas is the Veda mantra, which is the Gayatri mantra, which has 24 syllables. And Maharishi Valmiki wrote Ramayana in 24,000 shlokas. So for each syllable, he wrote 1,000 shlokas. And you don't have any restrictions as to when you can read Ramayana, how you can read Ramayana, and so on and so forth. And further on, during the past 1000 years, and especially during the Bhakti movement, you've seen that Ramayana has also been written in regional languages. Like in North India, Tulsi Krit Ramcharitmanas is very popular. And in South, the Kama Ramayana in Tamil is very popular. The Ranganatha Ramayana in Telugu is very popular. And you also find Ramayana in Bengali, in Gujarati, and so on and so forth. So I think this sense of egalitarianism has been there indirectly, where you want all segments of the society to receive knowledge. And I think that was also the purpose of writing the Puranas, to ensure that the knowledge reaches everybody and everybody can, attain Bhagwan and understand what Hinduism is all about.
अच्छा, can I add
So
something?
हाँ, अब बोलिए.
एक्चुअली क्या है, मेरे को ऐसा लग रहा है यहाँ पे एक शूद्र की डेफिनेशन में भी कंफ्यूजन है। नीचे जो कमेंट्स मैंने देखा एक मार्क जी का है, तो एक्चुअली क्या शूद्र कौन होता है? शूद्र वो होता है जिसको शिक्षा प्राप्त नहीं हुई या शिक्षा प्राप्त होने के बाद भी उसके अंदर उच्च वर्ण वाले गुण उत्पन्न नहीं हुए, उसके गुण वैसे ही रह गए जैसे शूद्रों के होते हैं, यानी कि एक अनपढ़ व्यक्ति के, वह शूद्र कहलाता है। तो शूद्र इसीलिए सभी जन्म से हो सकते हैं क्योंकि किसी के पास शिक्षा जन्मना नहीं होती है, पैदा होने के बाद ही कोई गुरुकुल के माध्यम से या अपने परिवार में जो भी उनके यहाँ अगर कोई शिक्षित व्यक्ति है उसके माध्यम से शिक्षा ग्रहण करता है। उसके बाद में उसको उच्च वर्ण मिलता है, अगर गुरुकुल में जाने के बाद जब उसका यज्ञोपवीत हो जाता है और उसने उस वर्ण की जो शिक्षा है वो ले ली, उसके बाद में वो उस वर्ण में जाता है। तो जन्मना शूद्र इसलिए कहा जाता है क्योंकि किसी के पास कोई शिक्षा नहीं होती जन्म के साथ।
Govind, Ganga, any of you care to summarize what?
Go and you do the translation this time.
I think what Parth was referring to is as a definition of what Shudra means. So he was just trying to say that Shudra essentially means a person who has not been able to receive the gunas and the knowledge that the other varnas have, and a person who has not been able to get education properly. And that's what the point he was trying to argue. And he was trying to say that essentially it's the knowledge that you attain after the samskaras and the nitya karmas that you do, that make you that make you a part of a particular varna, not just simple birth.
Okay, I am actually quite interested in Harkirat's view here. Seems to be quite annoyed by the fact that, he called Ranjit Singh, if I'm not wrong, maybe you can correct me. He's saying that he's not a Jat. That's fake news apparently. But I mean, a simple search will reveal to you that he was from a Sandhavalia Jat Sikh family. Like it's literally right here. Okay, you want to argue a case against, that's fine. I am more interested in what happens in the Sikh community. See, this is where the caste dynamics operate, right? I mean, we know through tradition maintained by Sikh intellectuals, mainstream view on the final Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. He was quite clearly a Khatri, right? And that's according to tradition. Now Jat thinkers will tell you that, oh no, there is a attempt to, make, I would say Guru Gobind Singh into a Jat also today, and that's modern politics. That's what is happening today. So I find it, I mean, there is no Khalsa warrior caste, my friend. I'm sorry, like
But I think
that's fake news. That's fake news.
But I think within Sikhi, if I'm not mistaken, they're supposed to forego the caste, and this is why Singapore's create, like everybody takes on Singhs. You are the Singh caste now, right? And the highest level would be, the Amrit.
Jen, your voice is a little bit bleak, or is it just me?
Is it? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Your voice went a bit low for a moment.
Oh, I must have walked too far away. Okay. Um, yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, um, within Sikhi Dharma, you're supposed to forego all Varna and Jati and become Singh, right? So, and then within this, the Amriti and the Khalsa would be like the head of eh, the Singhs, right? So I think maybe that's what he's referring to, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know too much about Sikhi Dharma. So.
Um,
Yeah, see, that's gonna open another Pandora's box. Let's not even go there. Uh,
but I
Yeah,
think we
I'll
should
but
talk
yeah,
squeeze
about that,
another time.
Gangaputra. Like,
Yeah,
I think we should talk about caste system in other religions
go
as
ahead,
well.
go
What do you
ahead.
say?
I want to talk. I want to talk more about that. You know it. You know it. Okay,
Even
right
I
there,
want to
right
talk
now.
about it.
Yeah.
so even earlier, I was talking to my Muslim, ghost. I was on his channel, and Muslims are also supposed to forego caste, but they're still very attached to their ethnic groups. So, a lot of Muslims will still say, "Oh, we're Jats," we're this, we're this. So, it's kind of where are we here? Even within Buddhists are supposed to do the same thing, but yet we have Ambedkarites completely forgetting about Buddhist principles of foregoing caste and advocating for caste, this kind of things. So, it's a fine line between what you're supposed to do in the religion, your cultural affiliation, and, where you lay with that, right?
Can I say something on that?
Of course, go for it.
Yeah, to add, I think all religions have caste, all societies have caste, and social stratification and division is something that is natural to human beings. Even if you, sort of eradicate certain communities, you're still going to see stratification within human beings because we live in an unequal world. And I think you cannot create a communist utopia where everybody is equal and you don't have divisions altogether. I think division is quite
Oh,
natural to
the
human
Chinese
beings.
have caste.
So
The Chinese have caste too.
exactly, and the Chinese caste
So
system is
this
still
is
stratified till date. That's also the point.
absolutely. It's see, that's the thing. Look, I would like to further qualify your argument with a much more sort of direct way of addressing this. Social stratification, which is what is referred to as the now sort of highly diluted proverbial caste system in India, is a feature of every old world society. The reason why new world societies don't understand it is because they were founded not on these principles, but uh, you know class, particularly your ability to possess land and property, maybe make money through enterprise, that became a significantly more important way to discriminate between the haves and the have nots, right? uh, but in old world societies, feudal possessions, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in China, whether it's in India, um, feudal possession is your basic unit of wealth, right? And if you're able to possess that, you become a powerful entity, whether it is as a particularly socially stratified group. In case of castes, you have certain castes that did possess a lot of wealth because they were higher up the food chain, right, the pecking order. For example, the Kshatriya community, by the way, most of their land has been snatched away by the state today, right? Something that's not completely happened in Pakistan, right? So
Even
they
in
were
Bangladesh, you
the
don't
rule,
have that.
even in Bangladesh, yeah. So they were the ruling elite, right? And that gave them social power above other people, so they did use that. Nowadays, like, they are on the receiving end, so that's another tragic story. But then you have other communities that are peasantry in nature but are able to possess feudal land. In case of, I mean, the Jats are a fantastic example of that. Down south, you have the Tewars, you have the Gondars, right? You have, feudalism supporting, movies and music, that chest thump on caste pride and being able to discriminate against other people. All this music in Punjab, okay, which is about jat this, jat that, you can't find one song, okay, in which, like, the jat community has not been mentioned, right? So much so that the so-called peasantry community is an aspirational community, the so-called traditionally higher communities. Like when somebody like a Badshah, starts singing about, jat this, jat that. I mean, I think he himself is a Rajput. He's a Kshatriya. But here we are, because the Jat community exercises such a powerful amount of influence. They are the establishment, regardless of what they were considered to be traditionally. Now you have the finest example of Tamil cinema. Okay, the topmost movie that is quoted on every list is this movie called Tevar Mahan. Okay, again, Tevars are a community of peasants, right? And that movie is literally about holding on to your land, latching onto it, okay, and not surrendering it to anybody, no matter what and who wants, it. And I mean, this is gonna certainly anger people, but I mean, the sort of reverse discrimination that happened against the Tamil Brahmins in Tamil Nadu was largely, a lot of the leadership did come from the Tevar and the Gondar community, right? Um, went after Brahmins. And I mean, it is a very tragic story, actually, when you read about what happened to the Tamil Brahmin community. But on the other hand, you have this other reality where you have powerful peasantry, but then you have also not powerful peasantry, right? Then you have, and these are, then you have the, sort of the historically marginalized and continuing to be marginalized people groups. For example, the Jatav community, which is mostly in UP and in Bihar and Madhya Pradesh. The Jatav community is a traditionally considered to be a, I think it's, I mean, depends on interpretation whether Shudra or lower than the Shudras, quote unquote, one of the, worse of lower bonds. And their traditional profession used to be leather work, right? Mainly making shoes, etc., basically cobblers, right? And that's the community that has given leadership in UP, in Mayawati ji, who became the chief minister for quite some time in Uttar Pradesh, right? Interestingly, Kashi Ram ji actually himself was a Sikh from Punjab, and he's like, he's the leader of the Dalit movement in UP. Because why? Because the Jat community is so powerful and influential, and they have so much power in Punjab that he knew that if you're gonna do this in Punjab, when you're gonna lead a Dalit movement in Punjab, because Sikhs are also Dalits, right? That's not gonna fly. In UP, there is a space to do so. So he was sort of in the face of a powerful peasantry community that has possessed feudal land for at least 500 to 600 years that we know of, right? And has commanded power in that area. He knew that there is no space to operate here. But in Uttar Pradesh, things were simpler, more easier, right? The leader of this militia, so to speak, called the Bhim Army, right, is this fellow called Chandrasekhar Azad, also used to go by Chandrasekhar Ravan, right? And he's a very vocal, advocate for the Jatav community, right? And he's somebody who will say really offensive things against the Brahmin community, sages even, on television. He's written Facebook posts about how he will like beat so and so, teacher, and you know, I mean, just offensive, angry, offensive stuff. I mean, and there is no consequence, right? Because because
So
I mean,
you're giving examples of supposed lower caste people,
Mm.
or people who are on record lower caste with in positions of power throughout the country, right?
sure,
Or
sure.
influential,
So
right? So you could even look at the president and your prime minister, right? Prime examples of somebody who's technically lower caste could definitely have influence. So,
Well, the prime minister is a lower caste person, hilariously. I was watching the Kushal Mehra podcast, and he was having a conversation with somebody, and he was basically discussing. He laughed at. Oh, he was talking to noted Dalit intellectual, and a highly regarded lawyer and professor, in Patna University, Dr. Paswan, who is from a Dalit community himself. And while having a conversation with him, he burst into laughter about when he was, and this is Dalit intellectual, right? So he's talking to him, and he tells Dr. Paswan that there's this one occasion when a white American think tank person told him that your prime minister is a Brahmin upper caste ruler, is like discriminatory fascist, like, which is really hilarious, because this is what happens when you come from a non-understanding of Indian society. Mr. Modi is from the oil pressing caste, which was in tradition regarded to be a Shudra caste. And then you have this phenomenon of Sanskritization, which is the phenomenon of social mobility. And through social mobility, they were able to upgrade. So then they entered into the Vaishya community, which is the trader community. Today, the Vaishya community is okay with them being part of the tradition. Of the Vaishya community mostly, but the history that they were traditionally regarded to be the lowest of the low, the Shudra community, it remains. The prime minister himself, is technically a Shudra, but in modern parlance, he'll be
Yeah, he
regarded
is
as an
from OBC.
OBC. No, but OBC is a constitutional criterion, ना पार्थ भाई, ठीक है? मतलब
जो उनकी
जो
कास्ट
मतलब
लिखी जाती है तेली कास्ट,
हाँ हाँ
उनको लाइक छोटी
हाँ
जातियों में गिना जाता है।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल। तो ओबीसी तो मतलब हमारे ट्रेडिशन के हिसाब से नहीं है ना, ओबीसी तो मतलब संविधान के अनुसार है, ठीक है? तो
जी जी
because they were a little better off, and they were able to successfully move up into the ladder, right? So therefore they are regarded to be some people who are less discriminated than the other. Therefore they are regarded in this constitutional criteria for the backward caste. You had the former president of India, I think Dr. Ramnath Kovind, if I'm not wrong,
डॉक्टर मनमोहन
and
सिंह।
Mr. No. Kovind ji. I'm talking about Kovind ji, the president,
ओके ओके।
right?
Yeah. Manmohan
Yeah.
Singh was the
So
prime minister, right?
yeah. So no. I'm talking about Ramnath Kovind ji just before Murmu
Yeah.
ji, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I was just
So,
supporting your point.
so yeah. So Kovind ji is from a Dalit family, and then you have the president of India, Murmu ji, who recently, like in my former university, there was this convocation ceremony, and she was the one who gave uh, their degree. She awarded degrees of students who Uh, held the topmost positions in terms of like their scores and stuff. She was the one, and she was actually gave a speech that I am quite glad of the fact that so many women are here, and most of the students that have topped the university exams are girls, right? And this is a lady of tribal background. Right. So in the caste hierarchy, in traditional understanding, the tribes were not even considered to be in the part of the social hierarchy, right? They were that much on the margins, like they have their own space, they do their own thing. And so modern realities of India are quite changed. Okay, you will be quite amused when you realize that a lot of the people that you may be talking to today from an anonymous ID may actually not be upper caste people, and they're still like arguing a case in favor of India, and arguing a case against this whole like sort of boogeyman that has been built, that the India is this place where people are discriminated on the basis of caste every day, because that's simply not true. There is
Uh,
lobbying, there is political positioning, there is vitriol thrown on either side, and sometimes one loud side wins over the other side. But to say that this is like a two-dimensional thing where white upper caste people rule with absolute like control over dark skinned lower caste people is a gross generalization, and a joke, frankly. To me.
Can I
Well,
Comes
add a
we
from a
can
point to
very
get
that,
low
into. I have
Gamraj?
understanding.
sources for all of this stuff too, so we can get into Risley's census division, how he used uh, basically phenotype and pseudoscience to categorize people from different tribes around. So I mean, I have all of these slides like where we could go into it. Um, Parth G has asked if we could go through some of these slides, which are kind of covering the scriptural thing. But yeah, just tell me which one to go through, Parth,
Can
and
I
we can.
quickly add a point, Jen, to what Gamraj said,
Absolutely,
and then we can go to this?
sure, absolutely, yep.
Yeah, to add to what Gangaputra ji was saying, um, I think even within the tribal society, you have social stratifications, and you had kings, you had feasts, and you had other workers and laborers. And I think most prominently, most people wouldn't even know Jubin Nautiyal, right? He actually comes from the tribalistic society, but his work was of that of a priest. So
Yeah.
within the tribalistic society
See,
as well, you have stratifications.
that's the complication about Indian society, right? You have tribal communities that follow the caste hierarchy, then there are tribal communities that don't follow the caste hierarchy. It's a whole thing. Jubin Nautiyal is a very famous, like, singer in India, extremely popular, comes from the tribal community, but he's a tribal Brahmin. Make of it what you will. As if like this is not confusing enough, there's more confusing things in Indian like social structure. But you know what, it's easier to say things like, hey, there's these overlords sitting on top of everybody and discriminating against everybody else. That's just simply not true. It's not. It's just what the reality of at
And
times is.
Ganga Putraji, even in the US, when this entire caste thing was happening, you had Dalits coming out in favor of the Hindu American Foundation, like Aldrin Deepak and other people who said that this is all
Yeah,
wrong. It's not true. We are not
a
discriminated
lot
here
of
in
a lot
US.
of these people who are behind equality labs is just leftist Brahmins, I would say. Okay, and
Yeah,
they
Tam
seem to
Rams
have, yeah,
categorically.
not just them, but like other folks are also there. Like when the
Yeah.
dismantling Hindutva thing happened, like all the names were out, right? So you saw who's who. And what they're intelligently doing is, let's say you have like 10% people in the movement which are like Dalits, you will give them the platform, but actually speaking, something else is going on in the background. So very politically motivated. What is the short-term political motive? To remove the government in power right now, okay, which is Mr. Modi's government. Like you create enough noise so that you create this, you corner the prime minister in a position where, like, he's left answering questions that are based on complete misunderstanding of Indian society on international platforms. That's what the idea is. So these are motivated groups with political agendas. That's what is happening. uh,
And
uh,
they're even
parts.
afraid of Dalits who are not agreeing with this narrative, who are speaking in favor of the Hindu community. So that's also
It's a
there.
mix of a lot of things. You're right. It's a mix of a lot of things. It's not only that. There is that element as well. There's other things as well. We can
Yeah,
get
yeah,
into that,
absolutely.
but but Parth is waiting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he
So
can continue with the
yes,
scriptural part.
yes, Jen.
जी इसकी नेक्स्ट वाली स्लाइड में जाइएगा। ये तो एक स्ट्रीम का स्क्रीनशॉट है जहाँ पे डिबेट के लिए गए थे हमारे भाई।
पार्थ, आप जेन से इंग्लिश
जी
में ही बोलिए ना, फिर हम समझेंगे कैसे, वो वही
ओ
कंट्रोल कर रही हैं, आप उनको
सॉरी सॉरी जेन कैन यू गो टू नेक्स्ट स्लाइड। ओके
Sure.
तो ये जो पहला वाला जो हम रेफरेंस कोट करते हैं शायद आपने पहले भी किया, आपने बताया जैसे चतुर्वर्णम माया सिस्टम गुण कर्म विभागस्य वाला, इसमें इसको आपने एक्सप्लेन कर दिया पहले, तो मैं एक बार दोबारा शॉर्ट में बता देता हूँ। श्री कृष्ण जी ने यहाँ पे गीता में इस श्लोक के अंदर पहले ही बता दिया कि जो ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय वैश्य और शूद्र इन चार वर्णों का जो समूह है, इन चारों को उन्होंने उनके गुण और कर्मों के अनुसार बांटा है, ना कि मतलब कहें तो जन्म के अनुसार। देन हम नेक्स्ट स्लाइड की ओर चलते हैं। ये उसी का ट्रांसलेशन इंग्लिश में, थोड़ा आगे बढ़ते हैं।
Okay. So the four categories of
Jen,
occupation.
it's a translation of that previous slide in English.
Okay, so this here, this is the translation. Okay, so the four
Yeah, it's
categories of
Bhagavad Gita chapter
occupations.
4 verse number 13.
were created by me according to the people's qualities and activities. Although I am the creator of the system, know me to be the non doer and eternal. So this is Sri Krishna ji, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so basically he's saying according to people's qualities and activities. Okay, next.
Yeah. Yeah. Next. Uh, then we have two references of 1 to 40, chapter 18, verse number 41 to 44. Can you open please references in next slide? ओके, जो यहाँ पहला वाला हमारा रेफरेंस है 41 नंबर का श्लोक जो है, इसमें बताया है कि हे प्रथम ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रिय और वैश्यों की तथा शूद्रों के कर्म स्वभाव से उत्पन्न गुणों के द्वारा विभक्त किए गए। यानी कि जो चारों वर्ण हैं वो उनके उत्पन्न होने वाले गुण और उनके जो कर्म होंगे उनके अनुसार उनको बांटा गया है, ना कि जन्म के अनुसार। यहाँ पे वही बात है, बस इसमें थोड़ा डिटेल में बताया गया कि जो उनके अंदर उत्पन्न होने वाले गुण होंगे जब वो जाएंगे गुरुकुल में द्विज के बाद, उसके अनुसार उन्हें वर्ण प्राप्त होगा। गंगापुत्र जी या गोविंद जी, अगर आप इसको इंग्लिश में करना चाहें।
Yeah, one of you guys want to translate this, please?
So again, I say this with like a big caveat. These things are open to interpretation, and traditionalist thinkers will interpret the same shloka through vocabulary and their own understanding of vocabulary in a different manner. But what Parth seems to think, it says here, हे प्रथम ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रिय और वैश्यों के तथा शूद्रों के कर्म स्वभाव से उत्पन्न गुणों द्वारा विभक्त किए गए हैं। I have divided Brahmin, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas according to their qualities or the gunas, and अंतः कारण का निग्रह करना, इंद्रियों का दमन करना, धर्म पालन के लिए कष्ट सहना, बाहर भीतर से शुद्ध रहना, दूसरों के अपराध को क्षमा करना, मन, इंद्रियों, शरीर को सरल रखना, वेद शास्त्र, ईश्वर और परलोक आदि में श्रद्धा रखना, वेद शास्त्रों का अध्ययन करना, अध्यापन करना। आई कांट रीड दी अदर, लास्ट पढ़ दीजिए पार्थ भाई, लास्ट लाइन क्या लिखी है, मुझे दिखाई नहीं दे रहा है यहाँ से। इफ यू कैन लाइक the last line at the bottom of the thing. No, the bottom of the yeah, that's the issue.
Hold on.
लास्ट लाइन वहां पे लिखा हुआ है कि और परमात्मा के तत्व का अनुभव करना।
Yeah, so okay, he's only talking about the verse number 41, right? Not talking about 42. So that's ये तो आप इसमें इस संदर्भ में तो नहीं है। अच्छा, 42 तो इस संदर्भ में नहीं है ना, मतलब
नहीं, यहाँ पे आपको ब्राह्मणों के कर्म बता दिए कि किस प्रकार के गुण और कर्म उनमें होंगे जो ब्राह्मण है।
Right. So this talks about qualities that all Brahmins should espouse, right? निग्रह करना क्या होता है मुझे पता नहीं है, very hard.
लाइक अपने इंद्रियों को कंट्रोल में रखना,
right.
और सारे जो नियम है, कारण है, उनका निग्रह उनका पालन करना।
समझ गया। So whatever has been prescribed as in terms of rituals and practices, and whatever is incumbent upon you to do according to dharma, you have to follow that first. As a Brahmin, you have to be in a position where you are you curb down your desires. Okay, you have to sort of have control on your senses, right? In order to follow the path of dharma, you have to also take whatever steps necessary, even if they bring you problems, even if they bring you trouble, even if they bring you pain or suffering. You have to follow that, and to be ritualistically pure from outside and from in, right? And this is very important, to sort of forgive other people's crimes. or trespasses. That's the better, uh, and your mind, your senses, and your body should be kept simple, right? Along with that, to study Vedas and the Shastras, and ईश्वर परलोक आदि में श्रद्धा रखना. Yeah, to keep faith in Vedas and Shastras, in Brahman, and in, heavens, I suppose परलोक would be that, right? uh, आदि में श्रद्धा रखना, वेद शास्त्रों का अध्ययन अध्यापन करना, और परमात्मा के तत्व का अनुभव करना. So basically, whatever is required of a Brahmin, and these are very high qualities that I suspect, unless you're in a life of, what do you call, uh, I suppose, you've not taken sannyas, right? It's very difficult to follow these things. And I see, in all honesty, very recently, this gentleman who attacked the prime minister over the consecration of the Ram Mandir also, one of our very noted sannyasis and one of the greatest teachers in Hindu tradition, displayed a good amount of anger and annoyance, which is unbecoming of Brahmins. But we are all humans, right? This is what is prescribed, but not everybody is able to follow. Very high ideals that are set for Brahmins, but you also live in the modern world, so yeah.
जी, और इसके
That's
अगले
what
श्लोक में आपको
Parth is saying.
वैश्य और
That's
क्षत्रियों
what
के भी
Parth is
बताए हैं आपको गुण.
right, but do we need to go through the qualities of Vaishyas, or मतलब हम देखना चाहिए हमको श्लोक, कि मतलब
जी,
हम बढ़
मतलब
सकते हैं
सभी
आगे.
का कर्म एक बार हम जैसे हमने बताया कि कर्मों के आधार पर उनको जब डिवाइड किया गया तो उनके कर्म किस प्रकार के हैं वो भी हम दिखा दें तो अच्छा रहेगा.
So Jen, what he's saying is that everybody's karmas are like prescribed, like as in everybody's duties are prescribed. So these shlokas are basically pointing towards the duties of every individual that is in the system. So his argument is that by looking at individual people's, like, I mean, individual groups, individual varnas, qualities, we can find that if you espouse these qualities, then you are entitled to be one of these castes. Again, this is something that Parth is saying. I'm not saying these things. Parth is saying
Well,
it's
no,
how
this
he's
is
putting
what
it.
Gita is saying, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I mean,
One
according.
one one direct interpretation of Gita is definitely saying this, but then there are people who will argue against this. That's why I'm censuring this with like a lot of tempering. Yeah.
Okay. All
And
right.
so
Do you
he
want to go
wants to
to the
actually,
next?
yeah. He also wants to go and point out towards the qualities of, yeah. So शौर्य तेजो, शूरवीरता, तेज, धैर्य, चतुरता और युद्ध में न भागना, दान देना और स्वभाव, स्वामी भाव, ये सब के सब ही क्षत्रिय के स्वाभाविक कर्म है. To be brave, to exude, a sense of confidence, to be patient, to be clever when required, and to not run away when there's war. Of course, this is in context of Krishna preaching to Arjun also, like he's having doubts about fighting his own family. So to run away in times of war, to carry out charity, okay, and um, Swami Bhav, I am not able to exactly find, like
जैसे
मतलब,
आप एक राज्य के राजा हैं तो आपको अपनी प्रजा का पूरा ध्यान रखना है क्योंकि आप उन सभी के स्वामी हैं, तो लाइक केयरिंग फॉर
right.
एवरीवन,
So,
ऐसा टाइप कह
yes.
सकते हैं.
So, so to have given the fact that you are the lord of your fiefdom or your kingdom or your realm, you need to understand that it comes with responsibilities of other people who are under you. So the lord also is like a responsible individual. So you have to have that quality in you. These are the qualities of a kshatriya. Then in the Gita, खेती, गोपालन और क्रय विक्रय रूप सत्य व्यवहार, ये वैश्य के स्वाभाविक कर्म हैं, तथा सब वर्णों की सेवा करना शूद्र का भी स्वाभाविक कर्म है. So it says to carry out agriculture, to keep cows, and what is क्रय विक्रय रूप
बिजनेस
भाई
बिजनेस
पर
सेल एंड बाय जो सिस्टम होता है।
yeah, so to buy and sell and to exercise truth and honesty in this matter. um, these are the qualities of a vaishya, that the trader caste or the merchant caste. And to serve everybody else and give your services to everybody else is the quality of a shudra. So these are the qualities of the shudra. Now somebody would interpret this as qualities, as what Parth is saying, but then other traditionalist thinkers would argue a case that these are the duties of caste that are fixed, and these are not duties. I mean, these are not your qualities, but rather these are duties that are incumbent upon you. So Parth's
गंगापुत्र
argument
जी,
is that
जैसे हाँ पहले वाले श्लोक में जैसे बताया था श्री कृष्ण जी ने कि जो इन गुणों को उत्पन्न करे अपने अंदर, वो इस वर्ण में विभाजित होता है। तो जैसे जो जो गुण
right.
बताए गए हैं यहाँ पे, जैसे ये जिन जिन गुणों को अगर आप उत्पन्न कर लेते हैं, जैसे आपने वैश्यों के सारे गुण अपने अंदर उत्पन्न रखे तो आप वैश्य हैं। अगर आपने क्षत्रियों वाले गुण अपने अंदर उत्पन्न किए तो आप क्षत्रिय हैं, और ब्राह्मणों वाले गुण उत्पन्न किए जो कि सबसे ज्यादा रिस्पॉन्सिबल लाइक कहें तो वर्ण है, तो उसके जैसे अगर आपके गुण हैं पूरे तो आप ब्राह्मण हैं। और अगर आपके अंदर इन तीनों के कोई भी गुण उत्पन्न नहीं होते हैं और आप उसके बाद भी लाइक सर्विस करना चाहते हैं तो आप शूद्र हैं। आपको इन तीनों वर्णों की सेवा करनी है। सेवा इज लाइक मतलब नौकर बना के रख लिया है, मतलब थोड़ा कैसा बताऊं, सेवा भाव रखना है अपने की, जैसे इनके सर्विसेज देना है इनको।
भाई मुझे
टोकन
की रिक्वायरमेंट है तो आप ही बना के लेंगे ना, तो सर्विस हो गई। आपको पैसे दूंगा, आपसे खरीदूंगा सामान, है ना। आप ही टोकरी बना रहे हैं तो वही बात है। वॉट एवर अदर सर्विसेज, आप लोहार हैं, इफ यू आर आयरन स्मिथ, राइट, एंड आई नीड टू बाय यूटेंसिल्स, लाइक आई कम टू यू, आई बाय इट फ्रॉम यू बिकॉज यू आर द आर्टिजन हु मेक्स इट। So those are the kinds of services that are rendered by the Shudras also. It's not just only things that other people don't want to do. So and there is a element of, so what he's arguing, what Parth is saying, that in the previous shloka, the shloka is quite clear. If you can go to the first shloka, go back to the previous slide.
1841, yeah, first one.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, so it says karmani pravibhaktani. See, this
जी
is
वो
my, see, I don't
श्लोक
do
है, आपको
scriptures.
उसका अर्थ बता दीजिए आप बस।
So I'm not well versed in scriptures, so I'm just reading, right? So here it says karmas, right, in the shloka, and the interpretation is gunas or qualities. So that's the debate part, bhai. कि जो डिबेट करने के लिए कहेंगे वो कहेंगे कर्म और गुण में अंतर है। समझ रहे हैं आप? वही मैं कहना चाह रहा हूँ।
आपके अंदर किसी प्रकार के गुण उत्पन्न होते हैं, आप उसी के अनुसार कर्म करते हैं। ये इसका लाइक सीधा आपको एक समझाने के लिए कह सकता हूँ।
मैं कुछ कह नहीं,
नहीं मतलब अन्य शास्त्रों से भी निकलता है इसका अर्थ। नहीं, आई नो आप डिबेट नहीं कर रहे हैं मुझसे इस बात पे, जस्ट मैं आपको लाइक थोड़ा समझाने के लिए बता रहा था ताकि आप एक्सप्लेन कर पाए बेटर।
हाँ। So Parji is arguing a case that your karmas define your qualities. So that's by extension. Although in the shloka it says karmas itself. So that's where the debate happens. Well, somebody who's more traditional will say, "Oh, karmas are not related to gunas." Okay, and then somebody else would say that and what Parth is saying, that your karmas define what your gunas are, what your qualities are. What you do become your qualities, right? So there is like a healthy amount of debate on this, which I'm not going to take any position on, by the way. I'm not saying.
No, that's fine. I share Par's position on that, because your karmas are pretty much the only thing that we carry with us, right? So it would have to be a defining factor on rebirth and gunas. I agree with that position.
So हम लोग इसके आगे चलते हैं।
So I can't do all the interpretation, right? And मतलब बहुत सारे स्लाइड्स हैं भाई, ठीक है, तो मतलब एक एक करना मतलब
नहीं सारे नहीं एक्सप्लेन करेंगे हम, खत्म कर देंगे ज्यादा लंबा। जैसे अब यहाँ पे एक मंत्र आता है आपका, ये जो जी
बात भाई ऐसा है ना कि मैं मतलब
जी
पोजीशन लेना भी नहीं चाहता इन चीज़ों पे। जब मैं अब कुछ बोल रहा हूँ तो फिर लोग कहेंगे कि भाई यही बोल रहा है। इसीलिए समस्या है भाई, आप समझिए इस बात को, ठीक है?
जी
तो
जी।
इसलिए मैं यहाँ पे
अगर गोविंद
कहना
जी
भी नहीं
हेल्प
चाह रहा
करें
था।
तो भी, या फिर मैं ट्राई करता हूँ थोड़ा बहुत, लाइक इंग्लिश में, वैसे तो बहुत गंदी है।
नहीं ठीक है, वो आप कम्युनिकेट करने का प्रयास कीजिए अपने एंड से, ठीक है? कुछ होगा तो हम मतलब उस पर डिस्कस कर लेंगे।
जी
So Jen, what I've told him is that like I can't like interpret all of them because like I don't want to take any position on this, and I don't want to be seen as taking any position on this also. So
Okay,
what Parth
that's
is
fine.
saying that he'll try. What Parth is saying that he'll try to do it on his own. If there are any errors or anything that is not understandable to people, then maybe all of us can like have a discussion on that. हाँ Parth भाई
Sure.
आप बोलिए
okay.
प्रयास कीजिए अपना.
Then we have a verse from Yajurveda, chapter 18, verse number 48. It say the all the four varnas are equal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Am I on the right page? This one, Yajurved?
Yeah, Jen, the screenshot of mantra and its earth, what is that? A definition or translation? Translation. Okay, translation is also mentioned there. In the right side, it's in previous slide. In the right side, the translation in Hindi is available, and in the left side, it is the actual mantra in Sanskrit. The Yajurveda, chapter 18 and verse number 48.
Mm-hmm.
It is clearly mentioned here. The all the four varnas are equal to each other, but depending on their qualities, what they do, they are classified.
Okay.
Okay, and then next slide. Then we have Yajurveda, chapter 26, verse number 2. It says, all the four varnas have right to read and get education about Vedas. Yajurveda, chapter
Okay.
26 and verse number 2.
This you hear a lot, like, oh, lower caste people were not supposed to read the Vedas, or they would get liquid gold or liquid metal poured in their ears or something. I don't know, something like this was.
And that's from the
I,
Manusmriti. See, that's the thing. Like, these things are said a lot, but modern day and age, everything is accessible to everybody, right? If you need teachers,
mm,
also, there are people who are well studied in these areas and they will help you out. Like, nobody is like not accessing the scriptures anymore. If you are interested, you can access it. You need good teachers, that's another matter. And yeah, and there are people, I mean, this is religious scripture, so obviously there's going to be difference in interpretation and reading. And one kind of reading is what Parth is saying. This is, see, what Parth is arguing does have some basis in, he is not a fringe minority, I will say this. The entire basis of Bhakti movement, and particularly the Arya Samaj, is about this. This is what they say. Go back to the Vedas and let's interpret Vedas, in the manner in which Parth is interpreting, where everybody is open to get any kind of education, any kind of know-how. Caste rigidity is usually like not seen in the Rig Veda and Yajur Veda, right? So that's what the argument was with the Arya Samaj also. Again, people have issues with Arya Samaj also, and there are good and bad things in every organization. That's what happened with the Arya Samajis also. It's such a complex
Um,
history. It's yeah.
I would like to just add one thing, right? I think the point is that when it comes to even the rigid factors, let's consider the rigidity to be true for a moment. That some people, some communities are not supposed to read them, right? But I think the point is that ultimately this verse also emphasizes it again is that the knowledge is not restricted, because you have so many other shastras who reiterate the same thing in a different manner, but the knowledge is still coming in, whether it's Ramayana or whether it's Mahabharata or whether it's Gita. And like Gita is the perfect summary of all shastras in just 700 shloka, right? So the point is that knowledge has never been restricted. And the point in Bhakti movement was also about democratization of knowledge so that it reaches masses and people are able to connect with the dharmic ecosystem altogether.
Yeah, and when you're tracing the history of Bhakti movement also, I think it's very important to point out that while Bhakti in itself was this, age of reformation where you have people coming in from all castes and stuff, the what is at least regarded in the north is that most of the students of the Bhakti movement at the time probably came from communities that did not have access to traditional knowledge and scriptures and all of these things. Mostly that was true. So you have this one great teacher in the north, which is Ramanandacharya, based on whose teachings now you have the Ramanandi Sampradaya, especially in central Uttar Pradesh and parts of Madhya Pradesh. And because of the teachings of Ramanand, you have people from all castes. Like, I mean, Meera is a woman, but she's like a Rajput princess who is practically shunned and disliked by her community for not, following the responsibilities of what is, expected of a Kshatriya woman. And she is a bhakt of Krishna, right? And it, again, direct evidence very skimpy, but it is understood from the kind of things that Meera is talking. That was the stated position of Ramanandacharya also. And again, you have the Ravidasya Samaj or Sampradaya, which is based on the teachings of Ravidas, who was from the same community as the gentleman that I was talking about, Chandrasekhar Azad, right? Chandrasekhar Azad of the Bhim Army, uh, not the freedom fighter. So I mean, he's from the cobbler caste as well, right? The Jatav community, and again, he is a great teacher of the of traditional scriptures and knowledge systems. uh, then again, in Nanak you have a Khatri, right? A Khatri individual who's also not a Brahmin. Again, he's also talking about these things, and that's the beginning of Sikhi with him. You also have um, I think there was this great Jat, Bhakti teacher also, right?
Dhanna
And this is
Jat.
all, yeah, Dhanna, right? So Dhanna
Dhanna
is
Jat.
one of the, Jat is like the, his caste, right? But yeah, so he's mostly regarded as Dhanna, right? Again, Surdas, you're saying, right? Surdas was from which community? I'm not so sure, but
He was a
Dhanna was
Shudra,
definitely
so
what Shudra, right? So I think
uh,
that must be
I am not
documented.
exactly sure, but was a Shudra for sure. That is certain, I think.
Yeah. So he's in the tradition of Vallabhacharya, right? Surdas, if I'm not wrong, or is it
I
something
think so.
else?
I'm not certainly not in
Yeah,
Ramanandi tradition, I think.
not in Ramanandi tradition. Uh, 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 Surdas is different. Like, and Surdas is, I mean, yeah, I guess you can call his works also kind of bhakti, right? Uh, Again, now Ramanandacharya is now understood to be like, the epicenter of, this is a person who is not a bhakti individual. He is somebody who is rooted in tradition, but he's teaching all these people, right? That's the argument that's made. Otherwise, people who have not had access to traditional knowledge systems, how are they like making commentaries and on these ideas of Jeev and Atma and all these things? Like, these can't happen unless somebody is giving access, right? So it is understood to be, generally speaking, there is some evidence about Ramanandacharya training some of them. Then other arguments are also, oh, we cannot be ever sure, right? But my own understanding is that Ramanandacharya probably, in all likelihood, was behind, at least in the north. Again,
Um,
Ramanandacharya is also, uh, yeah. I mean, give me a second, Govind.
yeah,
Ramanandacharya is also in the tradition of Madhavacharya, who is in south of India, in Udupi, right? And I think he started his own, thing, which then evolved into Ramanandacharya in the north, and that's where bhakti spread from. So it's interesting, how, like,
um,
knowledge systems became accessible. Yeah.
yeah, I would like to answer that because I also come from that tradition only. So
Acha.
there is a text called Bhaktamal. So that's a Ramanandi text, and it is also read by other Sri Vaishnavites and other kinds of Vaishnavas and
Mm,
all communities. So in that you find stories of about 200 bhaktas, and that includes all the 12 main shishyas of Bhagavad Ramanandacharya, which included Dhanna Jat, Kabir, Ravidas, and so on and so forth. And you had, I think, four Shudras totally, who were like the Shishyas of Bhagavad Ramanandacharya. And just one thing, Gangaputra, actually, Ramanandacharya is a Shri Sampradaya, and Madhvacharya comes from the Brahma
Mm,
Sampradaya. So we have four divisions among Sri Vaishnavas. Brahma,
mm,
Shri, Rudra, and Kumar Swamin. So Ramanandis comes under Shri Sampradaya. Now, within that there is a debate, because if you read the writings of some other Vaishnavas, including like Prabhupada and others, some of them consider Ramanandi Sampradaya to be a continuation of Ramanuj Sampradaya. But some people actually say that Ramanandi tradition is different from Ramanuj. Like, you have obvious differences, but it's a Sri Sampradaya,
yeah,
but
yeah,
not a continuation of the
yes.
Ramanuj tradition.
I am.
So that's there, and
I'm
the
sorry. I was.
philosophy that Madhvacharya was saying is
Mm.
different from what Ramanandacharya believed in.
No,
So,
no.
yeah.
I was actually confused. I wanted to say Ramanujacharya. I made a
Oh, no
mistake.
issues, no
You
issues.
know. Yeah. So Ramanujacharya, you have your Ramanandacharya, who's in the north, right? And from Ramanandacharya,
Yes,
it is understood to be that either he himself or his tradition or his school of thought allowed in for other thinkers, from
he
caste that
himself did it, I
traditionally did
think.
not have.
Yep.
I mean, that's again, direct evidence lacking, right? So my position on
No,
this
no,
is
there is
either his
evidence in
tradition.
Bhaktamal about it. So
Okay,
it's
okay.
a it's a big scripture, so it has stories of
Mhm.
200 bhaktas, but in Bhaktamal
Mhm.
itself you can find evidence that Ramanandacharya included all sections of the society, because they had bhakti towards Sri Ramachandra. So yeah,
So don't you think we should discuss this a lot more, Govind?
absolutely.
Because this idea of Ramanandacharya giving access to other castes, which is at the heart of the beginning of the Bhakti movement, is often lost, and we get sort of bogged down by debates of what the Arya Samaj did in the modern times and what was their position in the British times, and then or what the Brahmo Samaj did and things like that. I think this should be pointed out much more. As you're saying, like, I mean, what the Bhaktamal text says, about how these things happen, right? So, like I'm saying, right? Indian society is much more. The long and short of it is, it's much more complex than the either side of shrill arguments that you hear. That one side will argue that everybody must obey us, and the other side argues that nobody should obey anybody, and everything is like nonsense, and everything must be destroyed, right? So it's battle of the extremes, and usually Indian society on the ground is not as loud as these loud voices are on the either side. I mean,
एक्चुअली गंगापुत्र जी, मुझे आपसे एक प्रश्न था। आपने
हाँ,
अभी आर्य
पूछिए।
समाज एंड ब्रह्मो समाज दोनों को मेंशन किया थोड़ी देर पहले। मैं
हम्म।
आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग जानना चाहता हूँ आर्य समाज के बारे में, अगर आप थोड़ा कुछ बताना चाहें तो, बिकॉज
नहीं
दोनों
भाई,
की
मतलब
आइडियोलॉजीज आर डिफरेंट।
हम हाथ जोड़ रहे हैं भाई, प्लीज प्लीज डोंट मेक मी से एनीथिंग ऑन दिस। आई मीन, आई हैव नो प्रॉब्लम्स एंड आई हैव नो इश्यूज विद एनीबॉडी, ओके, बट आई एम जस्ट पॉइंटिंग आउट। मैं बस यही कह रहा हूँ कि दोनों तरफ डिबेट है, दोनों पहलू हैं कि लोग, मतलब आर्य समाज
नहीं
को
नहीं,
कुछ लोग
आपने ब्रह्मो
मानते।
समाज एंड आर्य समाज को एक सफ में रखा ना, इसलिए मैं लाइक आपसे जानना
नहीं,
चाह रहा
एक
था,
साथ नहीं, मैं
बिकॉज
उदाहरण के रूप में बता रहा था, क्योंकि ये आधुनिक काल के, मतलब अंग्रेजों के टाइम में ये उपस्थित, ये सब, ये मतलब ये क्या कहते हैं, संस्थाएं हैं एक तरह से, है ना? और ये ट्रेडिशन भी, मॉडर्न ट्रेडिशन भी स्टार्ट हुआ उसी उसी समय। तो लोगों के विभिन्न प्रकार के ओपिनियंस हैं, कुछ फेवर में है, कुछ इसके विरोध में है। समझ रहे हैं आप? तो मैं वही कह रहा हूँ कि हम इस प्रपंच में पढ़ने की जगह हमको इस बात का कम से कम मेंशन तो पहले, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि हमें हमें इस जगह से आरंभ करना चाहिए कि भैया, विभिन्न प्रकार की जातियों को नॉलेज सिस्टम जो है, हमारे ट्रेडिशनल स्क्रिप्चर्स हैं, एजुकेशन, उसका एक्सेस दिया गया। एटलीस्ट भक्तमाल के अकॉर्डिंग तो हमको ये मिलता है, ये इसका मतलब एविडेंस मिलता है। और रामानंदी संप्रदाय आज भी, जैसे अभी जो प्रधानमंत्री जी के ऊपर लांछन लगाए गए कई प्रकार के, है ना? तो उसमें आप देखेंगे रामभद्राचार्य क्या कर रहे हैं, उनको गले लगा रहे हैं, है ना? रामानंदी संप्रदाय के ही मतलब वो
जी हाँ, वो
चार
तो है कि
आचार्यों में
हमारे
से।
ट्रेडिशनल्स की
हाँ,
लाइक जो व्यवस्था है वो तो जन्मना ही मानते
हाँ,
हैं।
बिल्कुल,
लेकिन
तो
मैंने
मैं वही
बस
कह रहा हूँ।
जो स्क्रिप्चर्स को हमने जिस प्रकार से समझा है हम उसके हिसाब से आपको एक्सप्लेन कर रहे
बिल्कुल,
थे यहाँ
बिल्कुल।
पे।
और उससे कोई विरोधाभास नहीं है। हम ये कह रहे हैं कि यदि रामभद्राचार्य प्रधानमंत्री जी को गले लगा रहे हैं, तो सिर्फ़ मित्रतापूर्ण मतलब भाव से नहीं लगा रहे हैं वो, है ना? वो एक मैसेजिंग भी दे रहे हैं कि हम लोग एक्सेप्ट करते हैं, हमें समस्या नहीं है। स्वामी निश्चलानंद जी और स्वामी अभिमुक्तेश्वरानंद जी ये नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि उनके संप्रदाय में ये नहीं है, ठीक है? तो इससे हमें पता चलता है कि कौन-सा समाज आपको एक्सेस दे रहा है और कौन-सा समाज जो है उनके जो ओपिनियंस हैं वो ज़्यादा क्लिष्ट हैं और वो ज़्यादा मतलब उनके हिसाब से जो इंटरप्रिटेशन है ट्रेडिशनली चीज़ों का वो उनको मानते हैं। जो उनके नज़र में सबसे मतलब
जी,
सही है वो मानते हैं।
जी, जी।
तो वही पे डिबेट है भाई, समझे आप? मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि ये डिबेट तो होते ही हैं मतलब कुछ ग्रुप्स के अंदर ना, ठीक है? आधुनिक काल में भारत के अंदर जो कानून है, ये तो इस हिसाब से है ही नहीं। आदमी को क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है? भाई मैं तो आपको बड़ा ओपनली ये बात कह रहा हूँ टियर 1 शहर में आप जाइए, बैंगलोर में जाइए, दिल्ली में जाइए, मुंबई में जाइए, दिल्ली मतलब कलकत्ता में जाइए, यहाँ पे लोग डेट वेट करते हैं भैया, ठीक है? वेस्टर्न स्टाइल के हिसाब से यू विल गो ऑन अ टिंडर ऐप ओके एंड यू विल फाइंड समबडी। जब आप किसी के साथ डेट पे जाते हैं या किसी से आपको प्रेम होता है, उसकी जाति पूछते हैं। ये तो आज है नहीं ना, हमारे
नहीं,
समाज में हो ही
बिल्कुल
नहीं रहा
नहीं।
है। कितने
जी,
कितने
जी।
कितने हमारे समाज में आज कितने ब्राह्मण समाज ऐसे हैं जो ये कह सकते हैं कि जैसा प्रिस्क्राइब किया गया है वैसा वैसा ही वो पालन करते हैं। नहीं है भाई, आज आज के दौर में होता ही नहीं है वो। समझ रहे हैं? अब तो ज़मीन भी आपको नहीं रखना है, पर ज़मीन भी है लोगों के पास, ठीक है? आपको अब फिर उसमें भी लोग इंटरप्रिटेशन लेके आ जाएँगे। फिर मतलब क्षत्रियों को मतलब केवल क्षत्रियों को ही अधिकार है कि युद्ध करेंगे। तो इंडियन आर्मी का होगा क्या फिर? अगर केवल क्षत्रिय
All
लड़ेंगे
right.
तो? ठीक है?
Yeah, guys, I'd
तो
like
नहीं,
to. I'm
वही
sorry
वही
to
तो
cut you off.
मैंने
I
आपको लाइक पहले
was
सॉरी,
back in
सॉरी,
a
ओके,
little
यू कैन
bit.
कंटिन्यू।
Yeah, I'm sorry. Because I'm completely lost. So I'd like to kind of just reel it back in a little bit and try to stay like, I know you guys were giving examples of information being available to people in the quote unquote lower caste, and this stuff is evidence of that. That's kind of contradicting the modern day narrative of only this was available to Brahmins, and yeah, we'll try to just reel it back in if that's okay. So, thank you. You have to remember
ओके,
my
कैन आई ऐड
audience is
समथिंग?
mostly
So,
a
so the
English
reason
audience.
why I went on this long tirade is because I wanted to make my position somewhat clear to Partha without saying anything. That's why I, I was having
जी,
that
नहीं, नहीं,
conversation.
मैं लाइक मैं वो समझ गया था आपकी बात को, बट बस मैं ना लाइक इतना हमारा क्या रहता है ना, इवन जैसे कि मैं पैदाइशी तो आर्य समाजी था नहीं, मैंने कुछ समय पहले स्क्रिप्चर्स को पढ़ा एंड मुझे फिलॉसफी अच्छी लगी। सो मेरे को वो ओके लगा त्रैतवाद की जो फिलॉसफी थी। बट हमारा क्या आशय रहता है ना, जैसे एज आर्य समाजी, क्योंकि जो लांछन लगते हैं हमारे ऊपर या जो आरोप लगते हैं किसी भी चीज को लेकर, वो हमारे शास्त्रों के ऊपर लगते हैं कि इनके शास्त्रों में ऐसी-ऐसी चीजें लिखी हुई हैं। तो हमारा आशय रहता है, हमको पता है कि अभी सोसाइटी में शास्त्र पूरी तरीके से जैसा लिखा हुआ है वैसे नहीं फॉलो हो रहा है, बट स्टिल कि हमारे यहाँ वैसा कुछ गलत लिखा नहीं, ये चीज हम एक क्लियर मैसेज दे दें पब्लिक को कि भाई हमारे यहाँ मेंशन नहीं है कि ऐसी ऐसी चीजें जो आज चल रही हैं, जो आक्षेप हमारे ऊपर लग रहे हैं, ये मेंशन नहीं है, हमारे यहाँ लिखा तो कुछ और है, इसको प्रोपोगेट कुछ और तरीके से किया जा रहा है, ये हमारा आशय रहता है। तो मोस्टली हम लोग इसलिए
No.
स्क्रिप्चरल बेस पे बात करते हैं कि हमारे स्क्रिप्चर्स में क्या मेंशन्ड है।
So Parth bhai, one more thing I would like to add, okay, without saying anything again, is that what about those Vaishyas who are engineers and doctors? Okay, being a doctor is a dirty
हाँ,
job
तो
according to
ये वही तो मैंने आपको बताया ना कि लाइक देखिए ना,
and
मैंने आपको पहले ही बताया कि
and what
उनके गुण
about
और
हाँ, so वही मैं I'm not debating against you, Parthi. What I'm saying is, how will you qualify a Dalit priest? Like I was talking about the Mahavir Mandir temple trust, which is my temple. That is where I go. Okay, so the chief priest is a Dalit individual. I didn't know this until recently, by the way. And I'm not phased by any of this. मतलब मुझे कोई इससे बहुत ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ा इस बात से, ना ही nor is the people's faith in that mandir reduced because of knowing that the priest is a Dalit. If anything, it becomes more accessible to people, right? So how do you these new complexities that have erupted in our society, relatively new, I would say. By that I mean not just after independence, right? But I would qualify these arguments from maybe 12th, 13th century, and maybe with the rise of the Bhakti movement also. How do you explain that? So how much of the society is the same way as it was understood to be, like, let's say, like, I'm just throwing a number out there, 3000 years ago. Society, the paradigms have shifted. Society is not structured in the same manner, right? What caste is the IT software guy? How do you that job didn't exist 3000 years ago? So where is that person? How do you locate him?
देखिए, अब जैसे आपने आईटी इंजीनियर की कहा, तो वो एक जॉब कर रहा है, यानी कि एक तरह से वो सेवा दे रहा है। तो सेवा देने के अनुसार तो वो एक शूद्र में ही गिना जाएगा ना।
So then how about, let's say, if I'm a Vaishya individual who makes software, right, and I'm offering services, then according to like my family history, I'm a Vaishya, but because
लाइक
this job
देखिए,
I'm
अगर
doing
आपने
is a
कोई कार्य खुद का शुरू किया, जैसे आपका एक बिजनेस है जिसमें आप लोगों को सर्विस देते हो ना, लेकिन वो आपका एक बिजनेस है, आप वहां पे लेन देन कर रहे हैं, तो वो बिजनेस
right.
क्लास में आ जाएगा आपका। बट आप किसी के अंडर जॉब कर रहे हैं, जबकि यानी कि जैसे मेरी कंपनी है, देन आप मेरे पास जॉब के लिए आते हैं, एंड आप मेरे पास जब जॉब कर रहे हैं तो यू आर प्रोवाइडिंग सर्विस। बट अगर आपका
हाँ,
खुद का जब बिजनेस है, तो देन आप खुद बिजनेसमैन हुए ना, आप उस ट्रेडर क्लास में आए।
Parth, we can debate on end where we can put people, how we can categorize them, right? But what I am saying is that society doesn't exist in the same way as it used to, right? So
जी, वही
in that
मैंने पहले भी यही
yeah,
चीज मेंशन किया आपको कि हमारे शास्त्रों के अनुसार हम नहीं चल रहे हैं अभी। हमारी जो मेजोरिटी पॉपुलेशन है नहीं चल रही शास्त्रों के अनुसार, ये सत्य
exactly.
है। लेकिन हमारा जो मेन मोटो क्या रहता है कि शास्त्रों को जो मिस इंटरप्रेट किया जा रहा है लोगों के द्वारा, हमारे पर आक्षेप लगाए जा रहे हैं। जैसे कि क्या होता है, आप शास्त्रों को किसी ने अपने हिसाब से, जैसे मैक्स मुलर की ट्रांसलेशन ले लेते हैं, बहुत कुछ गलत उसने मिस इंटरप्रेट किया है वहां पे। अब वही ट्रांसलेशन दिखा के हमारे लोगों को कन्वर्ट किया जाता है। तो हमारा मेन मुद्दा यही है कि हम अपने लोगों को कन्वर्ट होने से बचाएं, उनको सत्य दिखाएं कि असल में क्या लिखा है वहां पर, आपको क्या बताया जा रहा है। जैसे सती के बारे में होता है, हाँ मानते हैं सती हुई थी, लेकिन वो किस तरीके से हुई थी, उसको किस तरीके से प्रोपोगेट किया गया था, वो समझाना पड़ता है लोगों को कि ये हमारे कल्चर में नहीं था, ये हमारे स्क्रिप्चर्स में नहीं था, ये सिर्फ एक प्रोपेगेंडा बनाया गया उस वक्त, और उस वजह से सती प्रथा चालू हुई। इस पे इवन हमने पूरी एक 3-4 घंटे की स्ट्रीम कर रखी है, कैसे वहां पे एक पुस्तक के द्वारा पूरा प्रचार प्रसार हुआ सती का, और सती होना चालू हो गया। खैर, ये अलग डिबेट का टॉपिक है, मैं इस पर अभी जाना नहीं चाहूंगा, लेकिन जो मेन मोटो था मेरा, मैंने वो आपको समझाने का प्रयास किया है।
Got it. Jen, I think we could move forward in the discussion. Already Govind is getting restless. Govind, bow to me, you Jat peasant. Bow to me. I am superior. You are inferior.
ओ पखांडवादी गल ना कर बम्मण।
Yeah, I don't have any time. Jeez, I don't have
यार
any
गोविंद भाई,
time restraints, so whenever you guys feel, like we could go as long as you want. I try to keep things, maybe like 3 hours under, because nobody goes back to listen to anything that's really longer. So that's why I was just saying, like, kind of be mindful. Most of my audience is a little English speaking, and unless you guys are stopping to translate, they might not really get what's happening. I know there's a lot of intricate
Trying my best.
debates.
I'm trying my
I
best.
know. Don't worry, it's totally fine. So, okay, were there any other slides that you wanted to cover, as far as scriptural references, for against the
हाँ,
current system
पार्थ
of
भाई,
caste?
जन पूछ रहे हैं कि आपको और कोई स्लाइड्स आपको और प्रेजेंट करना है कि नहीं?
एक काम करते
अगर
हैं,
आप
बाकी रहने देते हैं, इसके बाद की एक और स्लाइड है वो हम क्लियर कर देते हैं, मतलब जिसमें बताया है कि चारों वर्णों में आप मतलब कोई भी किसी वर्ण से शादी कर सकता है। बस एक ही ऐसा है कि अगर आप अपने से उच्च वर्ण में या सेम वर्ण में शादी करते हैं तो वो बेहतर ही है आपकी, कि मतलब ताकि आपको उनके गुण मिलेंगे। बट ऐसा है नहीं कि कर ही नहीं सकते दूसरे वर्ण में, आप कर सकते हैं। बट
भाई,
एक अच्छा
गहरी
आपके
समस्या
अच्छे के लिए बताया गया है।
है।
जी
यहीं पर समझते हैं ना, दूसरा डिबेट भी आप जानते हैं, दूसरा डिबेट है कि वो व्यक्ति वर्ण संकर हो जाता है, तो ये भी तो है
यही
ना
वो
भाई अब।
ये भी बात है
वो
पार्थ
वही
भाई,
बात
वो
है, वहां
डिबेट
पे
होता है वर्ण संकरता
आदिगुरु
के खिलाफ सब
शंकराचार्य की
खराब
बात आ
बोलते हैं।
जाती है। जी जी, वहाँ आदिगुरु शंकराचार्य की ट्रांसलेशन आ जाती है। बट जैसे ना ये आपका इसमें वेद में कोट किया गया,
पार्थ भाई,
वो भी कहेंगे
just
कि
give me
हमारे
1 second.
अनुसार हैं। जी
Let's just clarify one point here. This is Parth's view on this, and this is these are, generally speaking, these are the views of the Arya Samaj also, and that's the position Parth is taking. I'm not taking any position. Okay, I'm just saying that. Okay, yeah, Parth, please go ahead. Parth
Same
wants
here.
to present one more slide. Yeah, one more slide. He wants to discuss
Sure.
one more slide. Yeah, and
Which one?
that you have to. Yeah, पार्थ भाई बताइए उनको,
वी
बस
हैव टू
आप एक
गो
और डिस्कस।
नेक्स्ट, वन मोर। अच्छा, ये तो मनुस्मृति आ गई। सो मनुस्मृति चैप्टर 2 वर्स नंबर 11, इसमें it mentioned anyone can change his varna in his entire life, depending on his karma and gunas. In Manusmriti chapter 2 verse number 11,
Okay.
any person of some individual varna, like I am Vaishya and I want to change my varna into Kshatriya or Brahmin, so I can change my varna after getting that gunas and like qualities, जो भी कहें इंग्लिश में, qualities.
Mm-hmm.
If I develop that qualities of a Brahmin or a Kshatri, I can be a Brahmin or Kshatri, or change my one from Vaishya to Kshatri or Brahmin. It is clearly mentioned in chapter 2, verse number 11, Manusmriti.
All right, and I'm probably going to put all these references either in a description or somewhere, all these other sources too in the description, so people can kind of go back. There's so much research on this topic that it's like it's overwhelming. I have an entire folder now of just resource after resource. So if people really want to
Hey man,
understand the
we, we're Indians and we don't know half of it ourselves. Okay. So, yeah.
exactly. So,
Actually, in Gangaputra bhai, it's depending on our like अपने उस पर डिपेंड करता है कि आपने कब से पढ़ना स्टार्ट किया है। हमारी मेजोरिटी जो पॉपुलेशन है ना, वो अभी अपने ऐसी दौड़ भाग की जिंदगी में घुसी हुई है कि कमाना है, खाना है। इस चक्कर में स्क्रिप्चर्स पे उतना ध्यान नहीं देती है। मैं अभी 21 का हूँ,
Same.
मेरे को 1 साल पहले समझ में आया कि पढ़ना चाहिए और मैंने तब से पढ़ना शुरू किया। तो आज मुझे 1 ही साल हुआ है इन सबको पढ़ते हुए। फिर मैंने काफी कुछ जानने की अभी तक कोशिश की है, और वो सिर्फ 1% भी नहीं होगा अभी तक पूरे टेक्स्ट का, जितने हमारे रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट हैं।
Hmm. So what Parth is saying that it depends on when you start with this stuff, because everybody is busy, right? And like Jen was saying, like there's so much material, so many debates, so many threads of discourses, that this society is anything but monolithic as is presented to the West. Now Parth is saying that, I
exactly.
mean, he's consciously taken effort since the last year or so to get into studying, at least the way, like Arya Samaj takes a position on Vedic interpretation, right? And from that point of view, because he's dedicated to this, so now he's saying that he's beginning to understand a lot more. So that's what he's saying. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think how long have we been going? I'm gonna kind of so we're already at 2 hours. So, the last kind of the last section, I'm just gonna kind of blow through really quickly. We're going to talk about the British and kind of their application of this and the census, and then we'll kind of just wrap up with like critical caste theory and how these things were applied. So this is a book by the author is Herbert Hope Risley. And if you look up the Wikipedia page on him, it will tell you, I think in the first paragraph, that he is accredited for the formal implication of the caste system in India, right? So what him and a couple other British Indologists, I guess you could call them, they were trying to put together a census because the British needed to understand who they were conquering and how many of them were there and what kind of people they were. So in this book, I'm not going to go through it because it's how many pages? It's over 600 pages or something like that. Um, it, it basically, yeah, 682 pages. But the first chapter is named The Physical Types. So what this guy did was he went by phenotype. So he took phenotype of people from the north, of people from the south, of people from the east, and basically used looks like to categorize people into different castes, right? Um, there is a article I will post. Let me get that. And you could get this whole PDF online for free download. This
Yeah,
article,
I guess the point that you're making about this text is basically British pseudoscience to categorize people on the basis of morphological features like how they look, etc., instead of
exactly.
actually studying so Risley is an ethnographer. He's not, I would say, somebody who's intellectual also. He's a civil servant essentially tasked with the job of documenting the caste of India.
Mhm.
Reasons are important to understand why the British are doing this now. Indeed, it is about conquest, and what's happened is the British had two policies in India: the doctrine of lapse and the other one I keep forgetting. This is like 10th grade history in India.
Mhm.
Uh,
Paramountcy,
uh,
I think.
no, no, not paramountcy. So basically, if you didn't have a proper heir, like according to doctrine of lapse, let's say like I am a ruler of a certain part of the country, and I don't have like the elder son or something as my heir apparent, and that would mean that the British want to conquer that area, and that's how based on basically trickery and backstabbing and violation of treaties that the British pretended to sort of honor, right? That's how they basically ended up conquering, because it was not the British state at the time. It is the British East India Company that is motivated by economic gains and their own ideas of like to get resources and like run business, right? Of course it's backed by the British state, but they're not really the British state themselves. They are a enterprise, the private corporation backed by the government of Britain. Yeah. So what's happened is in 1857, because of like the British East India Company's rather questionable ways of conquering so-called territories, right? Now there's a large scale reaction, mostly in the Indian ruling elite, right? And it is backed by peasantry communities also, in large part. This is regarded as the revolt of 1857, wherein as long back as 1857, Indians attempted, 110 years, no, 90 years. My math is bad, but yeah, like at least a century before like 1947, which is the day of independence in India, the former day. 100 years before that, everybody, at least in some parts of the north and some parts, some areas in the south, everybody had this massive reaction, right? All the ruling elite, they went against the British, overthrew, attempted to overthrow the sort of control that the British East India Company. Jen, you're too loud, too loud. I can hear your keys.
Sorry, let me mute. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So in 1857, you have a situation where the British are attempted to be ousted from India, right? And in 1858, right after like this failed attempt to oust the British, which is the British East India Company, not the British state directly, in 1858, the Queen of England then decides that a direct rule should happen, right? So this was called the annexation, quote unquote, of India, which wasn't really an annexation, because for a military annexation, you've got to enter into that area with a military, defeat the ruling disposition over there, then conquer that territory. In this case, what had happened was you promised something to certain rulers, and then you violated your treaties, and then you took over land and territory, and that became the territory that was controlled by the British East India Company. But then in 1858, after this huge scare that they had that the British presence might be actually very short lived in India, then they ran a real scare, as in there was a military sort of response to the British East India Company, which was concerted between different rulers and kingdoms in the north at least. And so scared by this, they in 1858 they annexed India, quote unquote, as in the British crown was now directly ruling over India in 1858. And in order to not, warrant this kind of response all over again, okay, you have in 1881, this book that comes out, which is trying to sort of document who Indians are really, what is their social composition, the basic unit being caste, right? And they're trying to understand caste. They don't have ways to carry out genetic survey, so they're relying on phenotypic and morphological features of what people look like. And these are the observations that Risley makes are based on gross generalizations, right? And complete non-understanding of the Indian society. But these are the first attempts by the British to essentially, there is their own selfishness in this, that they don't want to create a situation again where there's a widespread unrest across South Asia, where people try to kick out the British again, right? And so they wanted to maintain their colonial enterprise in the subcontinent, which is why you suddenly have this huge interest. Like everybody wants to study, oh, who are these people? How can we know their society better? Are there fissures? Are there fractures? How can we, utilize that? And that's where the British come in. So this is the attempt at that. Yeah, Jen, please go ahead. Jen.
Yeah, perfect. So in the chat, I've posted links to a few articles that break down. Some people say that what was it? EPW is kind of like a more left-leaning website. So I posted two different idea. The other website, I guess, is supposed to be more right-leaning. So I posted kind of 2 points of view. I've read both articles. They're way too long to go through, but they pretty much are online and say the same thing. I've also posted a link to I think it's 1,800 plus page document of the 1881 census review that people can go through. Yeah, it's like 1,875 pages that you could go through. It's very in detailed and very intense. Also, the EPW article that I posted, she really does a good job of explaining the methodology of how they needed to put, how they formed the columns and how they separated the people. And the book that Risley wrote, it also explains how he measured the broadness of the nose and different skull attributes, hair type, etc., to kind of also make these categories. So you can read throughout any of these resources on how the British kind of used this phenotype to separate a lot of people. And this is where we get these Aryan invasion. We could get into that. It's a whole nother discussion that could take hours. Was it invasion? Was it a migration? Were the Aryans smarter? Was
That's
there
another
DNA? Exactly. Like, is there a clear separation between Aryan and Dravidian DNA?
look.
Does it affect IQ? It's so intense. So
If we're gonna go by Risley's interpretation, right? I mean, like his arguments are important to know and understand, right? Because you wanna understand like what is the Western mind trying to comprehend when they're first trying to study the Indian social structure, right? There's that element, but there's also this idea that with Risley's interpretation. I mean, Risley is like one way of looking at things, but even today with like the critical caste theory, and then like hiding behind postmodernist political nonsense that's happening in in the US, and then imposing that on Indian social experience, that's just like, in my opinion, this is wrong. Okay. uh, and when you get into these arguments like people are dark skinned, they are the ruled, and people who are light skinned, they are the they are the rulers. This is obsession with American ethnography, right? Like this is like you take experiences of one society, and which is a new world society based on entirely different social systems, and then you try to impose that system on an old world society which has a lot more baggage than any new world society, much more complex. So when you get to a conversation where you have dark skinned Brahmins and fair skinned Dalits, okay, and we know, I mean, anybody who
Well,
lives in India, who's
exactly.
lived
Like,
in
what
India,
do you
knows
do
this.
now? Right.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do now?
Yeah.
Because there's Brahmins in Tamil Nadu who don't have white skin or Aryan genetics or whatever, So, like, what
Some
do you
of
do
them
at that point?
do.
It's just,
No, I
it's
mean, I
nonsensical.
mean,
So, mm.
I mean, one of my closest friends, somebody who I've personally mentored, she's a researcher now. She's from a Dalit community, and like, I mean, she is as fair-skinned as you get, right? If these are the assumptions with which, like, academic uh, understanding of India is going to happen in universities like Yale and Stanford, and and even in the historically black schools and universities. If this is how things are going to happen, then, like, I mean, I'm sorry, like, your scholarship leaves a lot more wanting. Uh, Either you're
Um,
motivated by certain agendas, or you're certainly being directed by people who have certain set agendas in Indian politics, who are guiding your scholarship through a very biased tunnel, right? And that's what I'm saying. You want to experience, what this country is like, instead of doing hit pieces and doing like a 15-day vacation here and then pretending to be like, a scholar of, like, American social fabric, sorry, Indian social fabric. Why don't you, like, you know, base yourself out of an Indian university, study the Indian society here, live amongst people,
um,
go and do primary research? No, you're not going to do that, right? So yeah, go and you're saying something.
yeah, I would like to add something that you were saying. I think the point with India is that India is a country of 1.4 billion people, and you have a zillion cultures. Like, we talk about different communities and regions, but within regions, you have sub regions, sub categorization. So I think honestly, it's impossible for anybody to be an India expert because India is just way too big and way too vast to be understood by just one person completely. Like, you
Yeah,
need
but go
lifetimes
and
altogether to understand India totally.
you can
Sorry?
certainly have a clearer picture. You can certainly have a
You can
much
have an
more
overview,
clearer
right?
picture than.
So that's the thing. You can have an
But no,
overview of
no.
all the regions, but there are some things that people in that region know better than you, just like you have that with
Yeah,
other
so
parts of the world. So
so go and what I am trying to say is that you're right. Okay, I'm not going to discount what you're saying, but you can certainly see, you can't fully understand anything in this world, right? And I'm certainly not going to advocate this idea that somehow, like, if you spend 50 years in India, suddenly you'll become the greatest expert on India. No, like, that doesn't happen. Like with us, 3-4 generations in, we still don't understand a
yeah,
community full. What I'm saying, but what I'm saying is, right, what I'm trying to say is that instead of sitting in your comfortable armchair in Stanford, okay, with certain,
absolutely.
confirmation biases that you have over there, okay, why don't you come and live here and base yourself off of a noted Indian university, and actually do some primary research, okay? Like, go, and I'm encouraging this, live here, go do primary research, like, live here and go there and do shit, okay? Don't rely on what other academics are saying about this, because this is a highly politically motivated conversation. You think that I'll get a clearer picture about America without being there and just listening to black academics? How is that gonna fare? You
Well,
understand what I'm saying?
this is the thing, right? This is exactly the thing, and a lot of people don't want to put the time or effort into learning these things because this is ultimately
Jen, I would be
beneficial.
fine.
oppression is,
It's
people are benefiting from oppression in this day and age, right? So if you take away those labels of, oh, now, oh, you're really not oppressed, well, now we're talking, people don't want to hear this because it somehow makes you equal and less oppressed, which could possibly put a damper in the benefits that you're receiving, which, we can get into. I won't get into reservations
I
or
think all of
affirmative
us,
action, but things like this,
I
right?
think
So,
all of us, I think all of us recognize the fact that we do live in an era where, like, the United States and in the past, Britain has been able to achieve a lot, many things, right? And we do live in a world where, I mean, the English language in which we are communicating right now, that dominates. And today, like, I mean, uh, 2 generations ago, if my grandfather wanted to talk, he would say, I want to go here, which would be a British, influence on his learning. But, like, I mean, I don't skip a beat before I say, I want to do this, right? And that's an Americanism. And that cultural sort of influence will always come from societies and cultures and nations that become more successful in the international parallels. And that's fine. Okay. But the main argument, the thrust of the issue here, is that you cannot impose social and cultural understandings of your own national experience on other nations and peoples. This is the reason why people in West Africa get annoyed when African Americans, or now we're politically correct about everything, so Black Americans, right, they impose their worldview on what they want to see in Western Africa. And that's simply, like, that's not how things work out in American parallels. Things are changed. Things, I mean, there is, what is the common thread between the United States and the Caribbean and Western Africa? It's the movement of Pan-Africanism. Yes, but fundamentally speaking, Western Africa is an old world society. For all its depredations and all its, like, hardships and all its, like, persecution that West African slaves faced in the United States and even in Canada, by the way, that is something which has resulted in a fundamentally different growth of society and culture in the United States. And while there is a connection, both the countries are, in their social fabric and in their social compositions, both parts of the world rather, not the same. Absolutely not the same, right? So even to cast aspirations on what Western Africa is like because of what A or B or C has faced in the US, it's just, it creates a very highly inaccurate picture of things, right? This is what happens when you bring something like critical caste theory and then try to, like, because this is something has developed in the US and we can get into that, that you want to bring to, like, India. It's not the same. It's not, right? So, yeah. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Jen, but, like, this is something that I just wanted to get out there.
yeah, no, of course, no, you don't have to apologize. It's fine. I'm just posting. I'm posting all these links in the chat. Rajiv Malhotra does a really good job in his Breaking India and Snakes in the Ganga books on really describing on how these narratives or wokeism or whatever uh, have affected academia as a whole, right? So a lot of the academia that people, you look up about India will have these kind of oppression things embedded or narratives embedded within them, just as if you were to look up, African American experience in America, right? So that there's different ways, and even comparing that is just a misnomer. It's really not. It's miles away from each other. Like, we're talking about an ancient civilization versus a modern day uh, thing that is just not really comparable. But as far as academia and how these things have affected academia, I think he does a really good job of kind of breaking down how it was
Hey
applied
man,
and how it affects it. Yeah.
Wilkerson Wilkerson did a month in India talking only to Dalit activists. Now she's an expert on caste, and that's how, like, racial discrimination happened in the US because of the Indian caste system. Because so
But then,
that's how
like
we
even
have to
when
reason.
Martin Luther King, he went there and he said, "In my country, I'm a Dalit," and that was wrong for him to say that. Like he, because it doesn't work like that over here. Like it's a completely different dynamic.
I mean, MLK took a lot of cues of his, movement of peaceful demonstration and whatnot through Mr. Gandhi. If you
Right.
were to read Mr. Gandhi's views in the Hind Swaraj, he would have a heart attack. The
Well, yeah.
assassination would not have been required, by whoever the heck else tried to do that. So, I mean, uh, these things are complicated, you know. On the other
Well, that
hand, there's
yeah,
another aspect of
exactly.
Gandhi.
Gandhi had a lot of
In South
conservation as
Africa,
well.
Indians are being discriminated against. So Gandhi comes up as this leader, right, who mobilizes the community. And there he's got some very choice remarks against the African people also over there, right? But that's in context, right? So um, I know what to say, man. There's so many things. And as Indians, when we hear these highly reductive and motivated hit pieces against us, and
Mhm.
these bunch of academics doing one thing because promotes a certain kind of an agenda, it is really angering. It pisses us off. And again, not everybody is a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or whatever. Some people are from, and when people hear that, and they say this is just absolutely bullshit. It's like this is a misrepresentation. Yes, like
Mhm.
I know so many people, who would be from relatively quote unquote backward caste or Dalit caste, and they'd be like, this is nonsense. This is just Western bullshit. Okay, like there is shit that has happened and there is shit that does happen, but it doesn't happen in this motivated manner that these people are doing just because Biden wants things to be a certain way, or not Biden himself, the Democrat Party, or even Republicans. When it's convenient for them, Hinduism becomes a very demonic religion as well, right? So when you want a certain thing to happen in India, you start promoting these kinds of things, and that does piss
Well,
off everybody.
that's a
It's
whole
just
other
these words.
that's a whole other aspect of it. A lot of these British, people that we call Indologists and experts on
Yeah.
India and whatever, these are Christians, and they're looking at India through Christian eyes, right? So when they're reading these texts like Manusmriti and the Vedas, they're like, "Oh my, this is like evil, right?" Or hyper, this is all paganism and whatever. So there's also that kind of bias that they're
I
inputting
mean, somebody like
into,
Peterson,
right?
Jordan Peterson. I mean,
Yeah.
everything was just fine and dandy before he started talking about, the goddess Kali, and complete
Mm.
misinterpretation on what he's seeing the image as and what he's interpreting it. But there's a whole
Mhm.
reason, legend behind that imagery, why that image exists, right? And he's
Mhm.
looking, oh, so this is about so and so. No, not really, sir. Like, if I look at the Bible and I start saying things like, oh, this is just some dead zombie, it's come back to life, and so that's just a wrong interpretation of the entire
Mhm.
theological, you know uh, thing. And that's what happens. You think that these voices are not loud enough, so you can say anything and interpret things anyway. I can look at the white screen on my computer right now and say, oh, this is what black color looks like. Still won't make it true, right?
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of nuance that people don't have the care to put into it. So but yeah, I think I don't know, where are we at? 2.5 hours. I think I'm gonna start wrapping it up.
Yep.
Is there any want to do closing comments or any other points you guys think we need to go through, or what do you guys? How do you feel? Govinji, are you there?
uh Jovind, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm here.
All right.
Okay, so I have to give closing comments, right?
Yeah, sure. If you think there's anything else you want to discuss or anything else you think would help, what do you? Let's start wrapping it up. You know.
Absolutely. And I think the point is that, to what Gamraj was saying earlier too, um, like I said, nobody can be a perfect India expert, but like what he said, at least they can try to understand India, and they can try to understand the complexity of this society by listening to different voices. Because I think one thing that has been with the Hindu society categorically and India has been that we don't have one singular thought, we don't have one singular narrative, we have multiple narratives, multiple thoughts, multiple interpretations. So whenever you try to understand the society, you should listen to all sides of the argument, because there are multiple sides, there's not just single side. And I think the problem is that especially with wokery and wokeism, the thing that we see in the US right now, and the things that we see metastasizing at different places and different states in the US also, because after California, now you see these kind of things coming up in Texas and in New Jersey and other places. This is nothing but cultural Marxism. Because I think wokeism by its very nature is also Marxism, where you try to demonize one set of people, that people that are born white are totally racist and wrong. The similar application has been happening to the Indian society. So I think that is quite pernicious, it's quite insidious, and it's really dangerous. And what it does is that it demonizes the immigrant communities all over the world, not just in one particular country. So it's important that we try to understand, and we try to, sort of understand the nuances that are there in the Hindu society, rather than making these broad judgments. And just one last point, I think this bias that is there in Western media, Western academia today, has been existing since a long period of time. The way they view different countries, they have a very fixed interpretation. They have a very limited view of seeing certain things, and they try to apply that limited view on other people, on other things. And I think that is really wrong, because whenever you try to understand new societies, you should be open to new ideas. And they claim that they're open to new ideas, but they are quite restricted, and they're quite limited in what they want to see. So yeah, thank you so much for this session, Jen. It was great having you, and it was great being a part of this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited that you were able to show up today and for everything that you've contributed. And hopefully, yeah, we could do more topics in the future and hopefully involve you with that. So awesome to have you. Parth G, would you like to any closing statements we can help translate
जी
or
I just want to say thank you so much, Jen, for inviting me here. Maybe what I presented and what I explained, it is helpful to you or your viewers, and we'll do more discussions like this if possible in future. Once again, thank you so much, and thank you to all the panelists for helping me, Ganga Putriji and Govindji. Thank you so much.
thank you for coming. And yeah, everybody, I posted his channels above Gems of Christianity and Heated Debates. Go give them a sub. Um, and yes, hopefully we'll have, I would love to have more conversations on different, philosophies and the differences and all those kind of things we were touching on earlier, but maybe we have to do like specific shows for them because it would take way too long. But yeah, those would be interesting. But thank you so much for your time and all your contributions. Of course, your slides were amazing. Ganga Putraji, would you like to say anything closing?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Parth. Interesting to hear your views. I just, I want to, just close this conversation by mentioning, that Winston Churchill thought that when India gets independent, like it's gonna collapse in a matter of years. Like to have a very famous quote from him. Uh, it's right here. Yeah. They will fight amongst themselves for power, and India will be lost in political squabbles. A day would come when even air and water would be taxed in India, right? Power will go into the hands of rascals, rogues, freebooters. All Indians will be of low caliber and men of straw. I mean, that's where Britain is at today. So I don't know what he was on about. But
Mhm.
this is like a general statement about any culture and society, right? So, I mean, you can see, like, people, I mean, the point of this quote, is to point out that had it not been for like the inherent Hinduness of Indian society, the sheer diversity of thought, debates, discussions, as even Govind was pointing out, would not last a second. We would indeed be culling each other for sure had we been Saudi Arabia. Okay, for sure. If they had these many debates and discussions and discourses and these many philosophical disagreements, absolutely. Right? Indian society is far more complex than most people understand, right? And it stands to reason that people don't understand it and don't want to understand, because for most people, uh, discussions on India in general isn't part and parcel of any kind of international conversations, even though as we are becoming a more and more important part, at least economically, with each passing year now, there is some interest in our country. But this old world sort of generic reductive hit pieces that, oh, they have caste too, everybody is discriminated. No. Okay. Unlike the let's say the United States, where the majority community is that of white Anglo-Saxon peoples, and the African American folks are in minority, and so are other communities. The elite, quote unquote, the social elite, which is not so much of an elite today, because in a democratic country, this everybody's vote just means like one opinion, and nobody is better than anybody else today. Um, in such a society, uh, you have a minority of what, at max 8% of the total population, including Brahmins and Kshatriyas together, right? And they have been like systematically, like, I mean, this history of their persecution as well, which people don't want to talk about. It's a very important piece of history. So there, I mean, yes, there were discriminatory practices in past, as is problem with every society. But I would not be any more happier than living in this society. I feel blessed. Even as I am a non-Brahmin myself, I've said this on multiple occasions. Uh, if you were a Brahmin today, you would be in a position of, a lot of hate, mistrust, uh, uh, sort of removal of a lot of rights. I mean, on the receiving end of the, positive discrimination, as the reservation system is called, and you would be cornered, right? I am more than happy in this country, living in this society, quite content, quite happy with my traditional systems and its diversity of thought, which I am not obligated to follow one thing or the other. I'm quite happy with the current system of social equivalence that exists in society, the complexity of society. Every day is a journey of of discovery. I am I'm thankfully I'm not in my 20s anymore. But still, as I'm growing and learning every day, I meet a different kind of a person, every once in a while, that I didn't formerly know existed. You know there's all kinds of people groups in this country. It's a great nation, wonderful things to see, wonderful things to experience, many things to eat, which is a subject which is very close to my heart. And a honest view on our country and our civilization would be much more helpful and welcomed by us, even in its flaws and warts and all. That's fine. But what we instead see is a motivated attack, right? That we need to bring these people down a few notches. Why? If you have an honest analysis, it'll be widely accepted because the majority is not elite in this society. The peasants are in control. That's what happened. Wake up, guys. Okay, it's one thing to attack us, calling us fascists and stuff, and it's another thing to like actually develop some scholarship or at least informally get to know about our society and culture. We will welcome you. We will help you through it. We will help you understand it. But you have to do your bit, right? You can't, come from a motivated place and say that, now we get it because we spent 1 month in this country. That's not how things work. Thank you. I mean, long, very long closing remarks, but I felt like this was necessary to put out there.
That's fine. We appreciate you. Thank you guys so much for spending your time on my very, very small channel and giving me your evenings. I appreciate you. I hope my audience learned something. Like I said, it's such an extensive topic, but if anybody who's sincerely willing to learn about it, there's many resources posted. I'll try to post them also on my community tab. And yeah, hopefully we'll have more conversations like this. All right, I'm going to end it. Thank you to the audience.
Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. All right.
Bow, peasant.
Take care.
Go and bow to me, you peasant.
Oh my god.
Tell. I don't bow to people like you, okay?
You guys stop being casteist before I send you back to Pakistan.
Or Afghanistan or Bangladesh, you know?
Bangladesh, yeah. All right.
You
all
know,
right,
Bangladesh also has the same caste system like Pakistan does.
So does
Okay.
China.
Too much.
I know.
Too much now.
All right. I'm
Hey.
ending it. Take care. Love y'all.